Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is killed during the Sasuke Retrieval mission and wakes up back when he first became a genin. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Sasuke's hand was electrified once again. Naruto lay there unconscious. The Uchiha made his decision. Itachi, I will now have your eyes. As he plunged his fist into his rival and best friend, Naruto woke and screamed. Again he stabbed his Chidori into him, and this time he gurgled on his own blood. It wasn't enough, he still wasn't dying, so he began to stab into him repeatedly, and as he continued, Naruto's struggles slowed. There was fear in his eyes, but mostly it was sadness, and a look of failure. It was done, Naruto was dead. But before Sasuke had stood all the way back up, there was a blast of hatred and chakra. A power unlike anything he'd ever felt. And the world went white. When Naruto woke up, he was at the Hokage's office. Both Iruka and the third Hokage were there. But wait! Wasn't the third dead? He felt his head split, as he tried to remember. Why would he be dead, and why was Naruto so certain of this? What's going on? The confused genin asked. Well, Naruto-kun, it seems you used up too much of your chakra, making that many clones. I expect you're hungry after such an exertion. If you'll promise me that you won't attempt to make so many clones at once again, perhaps you can get some ramen on me. After he nodded, the Hokage handed him some money, and told Naruto the good news, that he agreed with Iruka about making Naruto a genin. Wasn't he already a genin? Naruto couldn't understand it, but he did understand the pain in his gut. So the orphaned hero of the leaf, who had lost all grip on his reality, trudged towards Ichiraku ramen stand. Passing an Anbu on his way inside, he didn't even take note that it was still dark out or that the ramen stand should have been closed. He gave a greeting and asked for a large ramen with all the toppings and spices. What was going on? Was the Hokage dead or wasn't he? What happened? Was it a dream? It had to be, but he couldn't remember much of it. The rest of the night, and well into the next morning, thoughts of what was happening hit him. He could remember things he was so sure never happened to him. Yet, he knew they would or had in some way. He had become a genin and been on a team with Sasuke and Sakura with a lazy jonin, who was always late. So why was he now being made a genin again? What was he missing? He remembered his first real mission as a blur. It was in a land of water and ice, with a face that was hidden behind a mask. What did it mean? Instinctively he entered his mind and opened the lines of communication with the Kyuubi. Entering the chamber, he stepped into the bars. Instantly the massive fox's eyes shot open. The fox had been facing the bars when the Jinchuriki entered, but shocked that the boy would just walk in, he couldn't react the way he intended, so he just turned his head and acted uncaring. Gaki, so you're here. Hey fox. Do you know anything about these weird memories I'm getting? Its head rose and its one visible eye squinted at him. Memories? This was not the Naruto whom he was imprisoned in. He had changed ever so slightly, but the change was growing. I may know, but it is not my problem if you can't remember something that hasn't even happened to you yet, the giant beast said dismissively. With that, the great nine-tailed demon settled down and began actively ignoring his prison, waiting for him to leave so he could check that. After exhausting his mind, and his mind's voice, our newly made genin decided to take a break. He remembered that the Hokage had told him how to get his ID, and so he left for the photo shoot. It was done and over without incident, and he headed to the Hokage to get registered. And then a little brat ran into the room, and just as he began tripping over his scarf, Naruto got the urge to do something. As the boy fell, Naruto's leg whipped out and kicked his legs out from under him. Naruto! The third had never seen Naruto lash out like that before. Pranks and things, yes, but not uncalled for violence. What? He should have known better than to attack the Hokage like that. It was pathetic. When sneaking up on someone, you don't announce yourself. Even as Naruto said it, he felt as if he had heard someone else say that exact same thing to him. Down on the floor, the boy held his face and glared back up at them. You tripped me. So, what of it? Standing now, the kid pointed his finger at Naruto. You must not know who I am, he accused. Yeah, I do, Naruto nonchalantly replied. Your name is Konohamaru, you have 2 friends, and you're going to be a ninja in 3 years. Your babysitter is a closet pervert and self-proclaimed shortcut to greatness, when in reality he can't even keep up with you. And your scarf is going to get you hurt the next time you try running with it dragging between your feet. Konohamaru blinked, stared at Naruto, and blinked again. The Hokage was also a little surprised and couldn't find the words to question Naruto's information, so he simply sat, trying his best to at least look all-knowing about the situation. Alright, who are you? And how did you spy on me without me catching you? As if I would need to spy, your stealth skills are a bad joke. Yeah, well, you forgot one big thing. I happen to be the Hokage's grandson? So what? I'm going to be the next Hokage, and I'll be an even better one than him anyway, and that makes you my underling. As Naruto said this, he turned around and walked towards the window. Yeah? Well, I've never even heard of you, Konohamaru shouted, but Naruto was already out the window. Looking to his grandfather, a stunned Konohamaru bubbled up with questions about this new influence in his life. That was Naruto Uzumaki. He is a lot like you. However, unlike you, he has no family, not even a grandfather. Yet, he set his sights for being Hokage right at your age, and has worked hard to get there ever since. His grandfather explained. Glancing at the window, Konohamaru had already decided that boy, Naruto Uzumaki, was going to train him. Turning toward the door, the Hokage's grandson made a dash to follow his new target and tripped over his scarf. The noise coming from the academy training grounds were normal except for one thing. Today there wasn't supposed to be anyone there. Naruto and his 20 clones were training. He had already begun improving greatly. He had already begun to hit the targets every time, not dead center, but at least it was a hit, and his taijutsu was faster as well. And as he improved, little details kept popping up, not just in his mind, but also in the minds of the clones. He knew there was more he could do. More he could learn or relearn from his future memories. However that worked? Then he heard it, the tiniest of gasps. And so, while his clones continued working, he substituted himself out and snuck up on the little spy. Konohamaru screamed and began kicking him the moment his hand grabbed the boy's ankle and flipped him upside down. Hey kid, what are you trying to do? Stop kicking me. The kicking stopped surprisingly, and Naruto remembered the sense of pride he had when the kid called him boss way back in the future. Anyway, it was time to get that back. So Naruto dropped Konohamaru on his head, getting a yelp of surprise and pain. So you came to me for training, right? No. Huh. How did you know? That doesn't matter. What does matter is that you're not ready for my kind of training. What? Why not? You have a shortcut, and I want to learn it, so how am I not ready? He was right. Naruto realized. These memories were a shortcut, but they were his memories, right? Meaning he had learned them before, so it was still all him. Well, for one, there's no such thing as a shortcut in getting stronger, the older boy said as he bopped the smaller one on the head. Then what about that jutsu you were using with the solid clones? That was my own jutsu, and it requires too much chakra for you to handle. If you want an awesome jutsu, you have to be ready to work for it. Naruto replied in a proud tone. Blinking, he looked at the little kid in front of him. He was certainly willing to work for it, at least if his face said anything. Now, let's begin working for it. Naruto knew just what to teach the kid. First, we will run around the village 3 times, then we will work on your chakra control. Naruto dispelled his clones and began at a good pace. Not his fastest, but fast enough that Konohamaru would have to work to keep up. Once they had made the laps, Konohamaru could barely keep running. So Naruto knew this was the right time for it. Now, it's time for you to learn how to mold your chakra. Yeah? But boss, I'm beat. Of course you are. In order to become Hokage, you have to work hard, and if you can't, you'll never make it. Now open your ears and get ready to learn how to mold your chakra. Boss, we already learned that. Okay, well, this was odd. Naruto was certain that he himself hadn't learned how to mold chakra until he was at least a year older than the kid was now, but then, that was probably the teachers getting back at the Kyuubi. So what now? What did he do last time? Oh, can you do a henge yet? We learned how to, but I can't get it yet. Great, we'll do that then. Now here's what we do. The training went good. Konohamaru was worn out, but he was still able to produce a sexy henge by the end of the day. They agreed to meet the next day as well. However, before leaving, Naruto had to introduce his new underling to the finest food in the village. Ramen. They were almost there when Naruto noticed him. Ebisu, the closet pervert himself, come to ruin his great day. And his teaching career. Then he realized something. Ebisu was standing on the side of the ramen stand, by his feet alone. Seeing this, Naruto also saw him standing on water somewhere. It seemed like a long time ago. Then he knew how to do it too. He remembered this guy training him in how to walk on water. He had explained how to use his chakra better, and in the end, he had been the link between Naruto and the legendary perverted hermit. But what to do now? It was true that this guy had almost taught him more than even Kakashi. That's kinda sad, but okay. He may be willing to teach him more. After a little persuasion, of course. Honorable grandson, I have finally located you. The man raced over to the two kids and adjusted his glasses as he took in the sight of who exactly his charge was with. Please come with me, it is unbecoming of you to be seen with this trash. Biting his teeth, Naruto almost decided not to even try. Hey, don't you ever call Naruto-sensei trash. He is going to be my predecessor as Hokage. So why don't you just leave us alone? Sensei? Ebisu looked as if he'd been told a joke. Naruto had had this same reaction from everybody. What could he possibly teach you? He'll certainly never become Hokage. In order to be Hokage, you need to be wise and strong. He is neither. Also, you would have to master 1,000 jutsu, and he has nothing to teach you there. Come on, honorable grandson, you know my training is the only shortcut to Biko. Shut up. There is one wisdom that Naruto-sensei has already taught me. That there's no such thing as a shortcut to strength. And as for Jutsu, Konohamaru brought up his hands, and in a burst of smoke he became a teenage girl, a naked teenage girl. At this sight, Ebisu's jaw dropped. He's turning you into a delinquent. How could you even think of using such a vulgar jutsu? What? Why aren't you beat? The exhausted child exclaimed as he turned back into himself. I'm above such a juvenile jutsu. All it is trash, just like that brat who taught it to you. Shadow clone jutsu. Ebisu looked up to see an army of orange clones, only about 20 of them, not enough to even laugh at. I'm an elite jonin boy, not some fool like Mizuki. It would take chunin level skills and everything else, in order for that jutsu to be anything more than making cannon fodder. Oh yeah, the army began to grin. Well, get a taste of this, harem jutsu. And in a puff of smoke the entire street was filled with beauties, all of whom swarmed the jonin with what could look like unrestrained lust. Naturally, he was launched into the air by his own noseblood. When the elite jonin woke, he was tied and bound to a stool in the ramen stand. It's good that you woke up, said his captor. I beat you, so now you have to help train me. Naruto couldn't wait to see what he'd learn next. Maybe he could learn how to walk on fire or on air. And why would that mean anything of the sort? Your so-called jutsu was a mere distraction and nothing more. Ebisu quickly sliced through the ropes and was hit by a pot of boiling water. Said pot had been hanging by a rope that was tied into his binds. Leaping up and patting his burned flesh, Ebisu growled angrily at the laughing blonde. You little bastard, I will make you suffer. Okay, how about a bet then? The prankster replied, completely ignoring his captive's threat. Never. Where is the honorable grandson? This was directed to Iam, who had just replaced Naruto's empty bowl with a full one. He said not to tell you unless you were gentlemen during your talk. The waitress shrugged her shoulders and put her hands on her hips, and you're not acting very gentlemanlike. Now Ebisu was steaming. Only partly due to the boiled water. No matter, I'll simply go find him myself. The waitress's eyebrow raised and she began to grin in the most creepy way he'd ever seen. And I'll inform the Hokage that you were sleeping in one of my booths for the entire afternoon. That got his attention. Why was this girl even causing him such trouble? It was obvious she was siding with the demon brat. Regaining his composure, the elite ninja looked down at Naruto. And what are the terms of this bet? Simple. Tomorrow I get my sensei, and it would be rude of me to seek outside training afterwards. So if I win, you have to agree to train me when I need help. And if you win, after my missions with my team, I will do a free mission for you, doing whatever non-dangerous chores you can think up, and you keep all the money earned. And now to sweeten the deal, and I'll stop hanging out with Konohamaru too. This actually sounded good. And what is the bet? That I can learn and master the tree and water walking skills I saw you use earlier today by morning. And if I can't do them before I'm assigned my new sensei, you win. This was good. There was no way that the brat would be able to master them in one night. But he did have the shadow clone jutsu now, and on the off chance that he figured out its hidden power, the jonin didn't want to be training him in everything. How about 10 lessons for 10 missions? This way he would limit the risk and make the demon brat do more work. Naruto knew what the closet pervert was trying to do. He would teach him 10 things that weren't any use at all, and say he held up his bargain. Fine, but I get to pick what you teach me. Very well, what did you wish to learn? He would be surprised if the boy actually had any ideas about training that were right. He'd probably be asking to learn a flash jutsu or a ramen jutsu. After I can walk on water, I want you to teach me how to walk on fire and on air. He was right, this kid was such an idiot. There was no way he would figure out the shadow clone jutsu's secret. That's two. Oh. I wanted to learn an actual taijutsu style that fits me. He didn't say it had to be mastered, and it was actually a reasonable request. It wouldn't be hard for him to teach that, just tell the brat how to punch right and teach him to use defense, and call it a flashy name. Then he could let the brat work it out himself. That's three. Naruto thought, was there any other cool thing he remembered? Not the Chidori. He learned that was only Kakashi's. So what else was there? I got it. There's this Hyuga spinning chakra dome thing, the Kaiken, or Kaiten I think. That one was good, thought Naruto. He could just see Niji's face when he used that jutsu. Ebisu was now interested. If he knew what the boy was talking about, the Kaiten, it was a pure chakra-based defensive jutsu. He never would have thought the demon child would ask for a defensive jutsu. Besides that, it would be phenomenal with his chakra levels. However, a technique like that required a lot of chakra control. Oh well, if he used the shadow clones right, he could teach it to him in a matter of weeks. After the Jonin nodded to him that he understood, Naruto continued. Then, there's this thing that Konohamaru told me to get. It's this AF Afrin affinity thing. I want you to teach me that. Well, he was a little proud that Konohamaru remembered his explanation of the elemental chakra. Yet, that was actually going to need a lot of work, depending on his affinity. First, I'm uncertain what you're asking for. Each person has their own affinity, and it is one of 5 elements: earth, wind, fire, water, and lightning. They each require their own type of chakra molding. If I understand, I believe you are asking me to identify your affinity and teach you that form of molding your elemental chakra, correct? Kinda, but I want you to teach me the advanced molding for it, not just the basic stuff. That way I can add it to my own jutsu. Well, he could give him the basics and let him work on those for a few months. And the thought of this kid making jutsu sounded pretty far-fetched, until he remembered the harem jutsu. Very well, and the others? Well, hey, you know how you said there were 5 of them? He didn't like the sound of this, yes. I want a jutsu from each of the other elements that aren't my affinity. They also have to be ones that only get more powerful with more chakra so I don't waste chakra using them. That was actually a good request. To think, the idiotic Gaki had thought of his large chakra on the spot like this. Now the Jonin was getting worried. That will be acceptable. He could give him some simple C-rank jutsu, maybe modifying 1 or 2 others down, but it was very doable. But the elite Jonin was beginning to think Naruto wasn't as dumb as he acted. And that might mean he would actually have to teach him this stuff. Okay, so what is the last one? This one isn't a jutsu or skill so much as well. In class they never explained some things and I wanted to Great, if the demon wanted him to have that talk then the bet was off. I need you to teach me how to get and take care of ninja supplies. All the shops kick me out and I don't even know where to find a bingo book, or how to make explosive tags or sealing scrolls. He should have known. This was stuff he was already teaching Konohamaru anyway. How the kid had missed that during class was absurd. Win or lose, I might go ahead and show you where to get your supplies. The Hokage will also want to know that one of his shinobi is being harassed by the shopkeepers this way. As soon as he said those words, the boy's eyes widened and filled tears. Ebisu was a little surprised at this reaction. On the one hand, he didn't mind what they were doing, but if the Hokage found out he knew and hadn't done anything, he would be in as hot of water as the others. This was simply a matter of doing his necessary duty as a jonin. Yet, to the boy sitting before him, it was as if he had done something extraordinary. Was simply informing the Hokage of misconduct such a great thing to the boy? With all of the details worked out, they agreed to meet at the academy an hour before it would open. And Naruto jumped up with a declaration of determination and raced to the nearest training ground. Ebisu was about to use a shadow clone to watch him when the waitress handed him something. Naruto couldn't help but laugh when he heard the scream. 27 bowls. How could anyone eat that much? That night Naruto worked off all of those bowls of ramen. He had already known how to mold chakra to his feet, as he had done it in his future past. However, getting it down again took some effort. It was a lot easier than he remembered it. Still, it took most of the night before he was able to stand on water. The tree walking had taken hours, unlike the week it took the first time. And it only took a little more than 1 hour to stand on the water. Now he had to master them. He knew he could to some other cooler forms of water walking. Somehow he had managed to race on the water using the water walking skill to flash around. It was like he was sliding on ice. By the time the sun rolled up, it was mastered. And so, he arrived at the academy training ground 2 hours before class would start, and waited for his new sensei. Ebisu was dumbfounded. He had left a shadow clone to watch Naruto's progress and see if he used the shadow clone jutsu or got any help, but instead what he saw was pure effort and hard work. Ebisu remembered what Konohamaru had said, "There is one wisdom Naruto-sensei has taught me. And that is that there's no such thing as a shortcut to strength." Now watching the great advances Naruto made so quickly, he realized that Naruto had actually believed that. It also brought to his mind how poor he was at everything, yet with just a brief description of the skill, he had done this. Once he had figured it out, it only took him extra time, to not only master it, but to advance past normal water walking. And to the racing he had invented. Even if Ebisu's own clone attempted to do it, and mastered it on the first try, for a kid fresh out of the academy to come up with it, and master it in only half an hour, it was hard to believe. It was almost as hard as that same kid learning to apply the chakra walking skills so perfectly in only one night. So after the demonstration, Ebisu resigned himself to teaching the boy more. Of course, if last night was anything, it wouldn't take as long as he thought. However, "Look, Naruto, some of what you asked for simply can't be taught. The Kaiten is a clan jutsu that isn't available, and fire and air walking are impossible." The blonde child he was explaining it to was sitting on the ground, arms crossed and facing away from him. "Liar! You're just trying to get out of it," he shouted. "Even if you don't know the jutsu, you have to find out how to do it and teach it to Naruto-sensei," Konohamaru added. "You made a deal, and if you even try to back out of it, I'll tell Grandpa that you have been teaching me not to keep my word." Unbelievable. I, one of the elite jonin of this village, am getting coerced into the impossible by a couple of children. Finally Ebisu agreed to look into the jutsu, and try to find a way to teach it. But only after explaining that it would take time to develop it. "That's okay, in the meantime you can teach me the things you do know. But I'd like to get it down before I take my first Chunin exam." At least they were reasonable about the timetables. He had at least 2 years before the boy would be taking those exams. That was plenty of time. Besides that, if he did develop those jutsu, it would be invaluable to the village. After the class let out for lunch, Naruto walked over to see Sakura. He hadn't said anything to her since graduation. Most of the students had been shocked that he was there, and even more than last time, maybe because he had been so quiet this time. Some of them actually got worried when he didn't even react to the team he was on. He overheard Ino and Sakura whispering to each other that they had been expecting him to leap for joy, and when he hadn't, many of the students had just stared at him until the next name was called. To him, though, it was just more proof that this was all real, and he could remember the future. As Naruto approached, he saw his pink-haired crush getting turned away by Sasuke again. He also remembered her words from last time this happened. Oddly, he couldn't remember if she had been speaking to him or Sasuke when she said them. Thinking hard about it, he remembered it was him, but there was something off. He was about to figure it out, when she turned around. Sakura was crying. She sat on the bench and buried her face in her hands. But Naruto didn't see it. What he saw was a slightly older Sakura who was also crying and begging him to bring Sasuke back. Then he remembered he hadn't just gotten all these memories, he had died. And he knew exactly how he died. Sasuke had killed him. Rushing off, he didn't see Sakura notice him, or how she had started to wave. Naruto ran to a ledge on a window, just where he remembered Sasuke being. Sasuke didn't even notice him until a foot glued to the Uchiha's shirt, and the attached leg swung out, flinging him down onto the street. Naruto was down too, and on him faster than he could even see. The vengeful orange blur tore into his old rival literally. His fists broke flesh, his fingers grew claws, and his claws shredded the Uchiha's skin through his clothes. He was a beast for these few moments, unthinking and enraged. The only thing the beast's ears held were the sounds of chirping birds and a waterfall. Neither of them had realized that they were being watched. Kiba was walking down the street and turned back around to see it. He had been walking Akamaru before meeting his team, and this Naruto was feral. He almost wanted to just keep on going and head around the fight, but didn't want to draw the beastly boy's attention. Team 10 also saw it. They were on the balcony across the street so Ino could gaze dreamily at Sasuke as she ate. Shikamaru had seen Naruto first, and realized what was coming, and when Ino saw her love get flung into the street, he and Choji held her back. The beating was ruthless and thorough. Naruto had trounced Sasuke severely, starting with bouncing him off the pavement when he threw him down, and continuing to how his fingers gashed Sasuke's skin, and his fists, and knees, and other parts he could use, continued to bounce off of every bit of Sasuke's flesh. Sasuke couldn't fight back or even defend himself. He tried to cover one area only to have all the others hit, and his arms were also on the target list. By the time it was over, Sasuke was on the edge of consciousness, hanging limply from Naruto's grasp. While Sasuke had no broken bones, there wasn't any unbroken or unbruised skin on his body. Deep down, Naruto felt the satisfaction of avenging himself. But he knew that this Sasuke wasn't the same one who had killed him, and this beating had to serve another purpose. If you're going to be on a team together with me, you're going to lose the attitude, Sasuke. You aren't invincible, nor are you powerful. If you ever want to make your brother pay for his crimes, being an arrogant ass won't help. You won't ever be strong enough to finish him off without the team that the Leaf Village gave you. And if you ever put that team in danger for your own stupid revenge here, he let out an evil intent bad enough that Sasuke knew he would die here, bad enough that the watchers all fell away and cowered. I'll kill you. Having said what he thought was enough, Naruto dropped Sasuke onto the street and walked away, leaving Sasuke to pass out, his last thoughts being, what is Naruto? Naruto was ready to make this work. He'd make Team 7 work this time. And while the genin didn't think he would ever forgive Sasuke for what he had done, this wasn't that Sasuke. He wasn't dead. He still had his life, even after what happened between them at the Valley of the Ends. Sakura couldn't believe Kiba's claims that Naruto had beaten Sasuke, especially that badly. So when Ino also confirmed it, she was shocked. But the girls seemed completely shaken from the admission. Naruto, the dead last, the loser, had somehow beaten Sasuke into a bloody pulp. And if Ino said it, then he must have, because there was no way she would make up a story like that about Sasuke. And after the other teams had left, when she tried to yell at him for it, he ignored her. Slamming her fist into his head ended with her fist stuck in a metal desk. And she was stuck there until their sensei arrived 2 hours later. Only 2? That was different. He had been 4 hours late the first time they waited on him. Meeting him on the roof, their jonin told them they would do introductions and a test of some sort at Training Ground 7 the next morning. Since Sasuke wasn't here, someone would have to tell him. Immediately Sakura jumped up, volunteering with a joyous screech. She would go to the hospital and feed him a nice peeled apple at the instructions of her new sensei, and then tell him where they would meet up the next day. Maybe she could even convince him to walk there with her. Leaving the academy, Naruto went in search of Ebisu, who had told him to find him at the Circle of Pillars after his team activities were over. Naruto hoped the closet pervert hadn't thought he'd be out very soon, or at least brought something to do while he waited. It wasn't like Naruto could have just told him who his sensei was going to be, and unfortunately for the jonin, he couldn't think of another excuse to let the man know how long it would take. At least this time his sensei had only been 2 hours late, instead of the 4 they had waited last time. Naruto still wasn't sure why he had been early. It was shocking. The thoughtful genin soon found his temporary sensei, ironically, in the training ground right behind Team 7's own. It took about 10 minutes of running to get across Training Ground 7 and into number 17. The genin, having no idea where the Circle of Pillars was, had needed to use one of his few emergency resources. One sexy jutsu later, he had gotten a full map of Konoha from the academy geography teacher's office. Not that geography was the only thing the guy taught, he also taught history of the 5 and international politics, but Naruto had never really participated in those classes. As he entered Training Ground 17, he passed a row of towering training posts. The line of them went all the way around the training ground. Must be how it got its nickname, the vessel thought. Each post seemed to get taller heading east, but shorter heading west. As the genin continued inwards, he could see where they became normal-sized and began getting taller again heading north. The whole training ground was about 5 kilometers across. Inside the circle was a mixture of lands. The far side had a massive curving stone wall, just inside the circle. Probably so anyone who fell from the highest post could catch themselves on it. It covered about a third of the way around the circle. Coming inwards was various trees and a small lake fed by a rapidly flowing river, which passed right through the grounds in an outward curve. The tree line stopped at the far side of the river. On this side of the river was its beach. Further inwards, in the center of the grounds, was a massive stone column going up as high as Naruto could see. How he wasn't able to see it from Training Ground 7 was impossible. Except that it seemed to become more and more visible as he got closer, like if it was hidden by genjutsu or something the farther out you got from it. It was huge. At least 1 kilometer wide, and encircled by a ravine that went about 6 meters deep and 10 wide, all the way around. Around that was a stone path, flat and wide. Almost like a track, it even had a few obstacles Naruto could see as it started to curve around the other side of the stone's center. To the east was a pile of rocks that rose out of the lakeside and climbed all the way up to the top of the wall, before curving and steeply cascading down. On the near side of the rock pile was large uneven chunks of grassy land, which changed into the grassy plain he was on at the entrance. To the west side from the entrance was a flat packed dirt training area with 10 more training posts near that area's center. Each of these, while normal in height, had different thicknesses and a rounded top. One, the thinnest, even came to a point. This was where Ebisu waited. Just beyond that was the river's exit out of the training grounds, where the tree line started, and the trees increased in size as they grew closer into the forest at the wall. He couldn't see where the river came in. The genin decided it must be around the other side of the stone tower. After a brief greeting, which was more respectful than the demon container had expected, the closet pervert told him he hadn't expected him to find this place right after. So he had occupied himself while waiting. In truth, he'd been intentionally vague about where it was so he could have time to prepare, both while the boy was in class and while he was searching. It wasn't like it took me that long to find you. Sensei was late for our introduction. Seeing the disbelieving look on the stuck-up adult's face, Naruto switched the comment from a complaint to something more believable. Ebisu had said he looked up to his perverted sensei, right? Yeah. I got Kakashi the copy ninja as my sensei. He was probably on some secret mission for the Hokage, and that's why he was late. Not that he gave us a reason. The Jonin coughed and adjusted his glasses at that, looking to Naruto with a reproachful glare. Yes, well, a Jonin of his caliber has no need to tell genin anything. One can only wonder how you got him for a sensei. Naruto replied with much less enthusiasm, that's easy, I'm the dead last. And they always put the dead last with the rookie of the year. And the only one in the village who can teach Sasuke team how to use a Sharingan is Kakashi, duh. I could have told you that. Ignoring complaints the boy had about his superior teammate, Ebisu reevaluated his time frame. With the knowledge that the Naruto would be training under the copycat ninja, alongside the Uchiha genius, Ebisu decided that the little orange genin was going to need a lot of his problems fixed immediately if he was going to even keep up. Firstly, with the team the boy was on, their sensei was likely to focus on the clan heir, and leave the other two to their own training. However, Naruto's basics being so poor, they would hold the whole team back unless the genin himself was able to correct them. There was little hope for that. Assisting the pariah turned out to be vastly more important to the village's reputation than the Jonin had ever considered feasible. The team he'd been placed on would need to be sent on higher-ranked missions sooner rather than later, if for no other reason than to let the village brag about having an active Uchiha in the ranks. It was also likely that the Chunin exam deadline he had established would now be moved forward to sometime in the next year. It would be either this coming exam or the next. He couldn't possibly hold to his bet with the boy in that short amount of time. The only thing he could do about it for the moment was to see how far he had to go with what he had to work with. And so, his first task was to get an idea of what the boy was already capable of. In order to begin, I need to know the full extent of your abilities or lack thereof. So you need to tell me everything you can do that you think in any possible way could help with your being a ninja. And be honest about it, the more I know about your abilities, the more precise my own training schedule for you can be. The list was short and only included what he learned at the academy, which was incredibly less than he should have learned, and the shadow clone jutsu. It wouldn't be enough. How the boy was able to learn water walking when he couldn't even float a leaf was confounding. Besides that, all the boy's basic abilities such as rope escape, substitution, general kenjutsu and for lack of better classification intelligence were all lacking. What had the instructors been teaching? While the man could understand their bias toward the beast, there was no way they could have possibly held the boy back this far without endangering the other students. So Ebisu decided, against his better judgment, that he needed to reveal the secret of shadow clones. Once the boy had a grasp on retaining the feedback, the agonized Jonin could start him on an education spree disguised as training. After he had ensured the boy had the basics of shinobi theory and rules, he would give the boy a break from the mental strain and work with him on his atrocious taijutsu. Uzumaki-san, there is an aspect of the jutsu you acquired that as yet seems to still elude you. The boy looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? The clones work great? They're not sick or weak or stupid looking or anything. Brat, just listen to me. The shadow clone, while meant to be a solid, was not created for battle or labor as you have been applying them. Looking the boy in the eye, the trusted educator for the honorable grandson braced himself for what was likely to be an extended lecture. When the clone is created, it is a shell of chakra that extends inwards based on the quality of the construct. However, this shell is empty and hollow. By itself, the shell can't be sustained for more than a few moments, and furthermore it can't move or perform any autonomous, independent functions. The Jonin hastily dumbed down his words at the easily confused expression his unwelcome student displayed. It's like an egg shell without the egg inside it. If you only have the shell, it's there, but you can't cook breakfast. And the understanding set in. There was a reason he was chosen to teach the third heir. Now, in order to use the clone, you must fill in the egg. You fill the shell with your own chakra, thus it requires vastly more chakra than a normal clone. This chakra is what sustains the clone and gives it its intelligence, allowing it to move on its own. The boy was nodding his head almost exactly like Konohamaru had when he explained the jutsu to the younger boy. The younger child had been begging to know what it was, and to ensure the boy understood the dangers of attempting it, Ebisu gladly gave him a full explanation. Only finishing, when he was certain the boy had a firm grasp on the amount of chakra he would need to build up if he wanted to use it. Seeing the similarities between their enthusiastic learning expressions gave the Jonin a bad taste at the back of his throat. The blonde clearly understood what he was being told, even if it had required dumbing down. The Jonin had his students' full attention. And there were no pranks, no misbehavior or distractions. Clearly the boy wanted to learn. It was as he had begun to suspect. The boy's reported behavioral problems in class stemmed solely from the treatment he received at the academy. Privately, Ebisu allowed his mind to picture what the boy could have become if he had been the one teaching the container from the start. When the clone's shell is disrupted, from either chakra or a physical blow, the shell will dissolve. At the same time, the chakra that had filled it will return to the clone's creator, as in you. When you receive the chakra from the clone, you will also receive all the information it carried with it. Meaning, you will remember everything that the clone experienced. Naruto was clearly surprised. I had considered the possibility that you knew, after Konohamaru told me about your training the other day. To say he'd been shocked was a little short. Once he had agreed and sent the boy off to class, he wanted to immediately request an audience with the third himself on the matter. However, he still had to relieve himself of his own untamable ward. It was as he was debating the avenues of care for the boy to be placed with, that the honorable grandson begged to know what the jutsu was. Explaining as he did, how he had found Naruto-sensei using over a dozen of them in his training. Which was cause for question. If the fox vessel did know the secret, then why hadn't he used it during the bet? If you didn't know you were receiving memories, then why did you have your clones training too? Well, it was mostly to figure out how to do it, and once they got that down I either saw how they did it, or they told me. It just meant I could try more ways faster. In actuality it had been because once one of them remembered something they could tell him, and if he thought about it for a moment, he would remember it too. Naruto had recalled many of the minor improvements he'd made in his training over the last year that way. But he could still only vaguely recall his future life. Alright Naruto, we should start by getting you accustomed to reading the feedback as it is called. First I'm going to have you create a clone and I'm going to work with the clone on a new jutsu. Hey, this better not be a trick to get out of your 10 lessons. Naruto wasn't sure anyone would be willing to teach him something not on the list. Never you mind that, boy. This is a variant of the shadow clone. So really, I'm only assisting you in your chakra control. Which I might add will need to be mastered far more if you wish to have any hope of completing the whole 10 lessons. Besides that, the jutsu I have in mind does in fact fall under a section of lesson number 10. Well, you still got a lot more than a single jutsu to teach for that one. The genin was a little shocked. Ebisu was actually planning out a fair deal to him. The man he remembered hated him. Maybe it was the bet. Or could Ebisu actually be that good a teacher that his pride as a teacher wouldn't let him simply half-ass it? That explained why the old man hired him anyway. We will get to that, yes. But for now, create your clone and then I want you to run from here to the memorial stone and then back to the line of training posts you passed to get here. You will circle the posts on the outside until your clone dispels, and then come back to perform the jutsu. I will not be telling the original you any part of the jutsu so that you will need to recall only what your clone has learned. If you can't perform the jutsu, then I will instruct you to make a new clone and restart your running. After making the clone, the real brat took off at a speed the Jonin could only assume was as fast as the genin was able, reminding Ebisu that he needed to teach the boy how to set a pace when running. Looking to his clone student, the special Jonin began explaining how to perform the shadow clone projectile jutsu. The boy quickly understood the concept of casting his shadow clone onto something other than himself, and was easily able to pick up making the shadow clone of a rock in his palm. But when it came to throwing the rock and cloning it at the same time, the genin was unable to do so. Deciding that it was good enough for his purposes, the Jonin struck the genin with a very painful nerve strike. If the feedback from that didn't catch the brat's attention, then this method of teaching him wouldn't be possible. The Jonin had considered numerous times in the last half hour about why the boy wasn't able to receive the memories, and it occurred to him that it may have been the sheer mass of chakra the boy had. Which meant if the original wasn't actively watching for it, then it would have to take a sizable shock to bring the memories to the surface. It took Naruto another 10 minutes to arrive after he received the memories of the shadow clone. His path around Training Ground 17 was not a very short one. He had only gone around once since he started. It had to be at least 20 kilometers. As he ran, he watched the posts get taller, and once he hit the wall, he found that they were no longer spaced evenly. There were even some that were posted in the ground farther out so that if you were hopping, as Naruto assumed they were used for, then you would have to turn. This continued and even got worse as he passed the end of the wall. Soon they began to slant at angles as well. As they became shorter, some of them even started to sway in the breeze. These were made of entirely different types of wood so that the sway could be measured. Once the posts became low enough that he could see their tops, the running genin saw that unlike they had been when starting at the 10 training posts, the tops of these ones were no longer flat, they had rounded or angled or even bristled tops. He was almost back to the entrance when he felt it, like someone blowing air into his ears, or a really big sneeze that built up and up but never came. It wasn't unlike his own lost memories of the future. He could see both what he was doing now and what he remembered doing then. The jutsu Ebisu taught him was able to make a copy of his tools or whatever else he had in his hands, and he also felt the phantom shadow of a really bad pain in his chest, just at the shoulder. Arriving at the 10 posts, Naruto paused to catch his breath. And in a few short breaths he had it back. Hey, I think I remembered it on the first try. We'll see on another topic. When running for long distances, it is not beneficial to push yourself to your top speed from the very start. The Jonin was clearly irritated at him. But that wasn't anywhere near my top speed. I can run loads faster if I want to. Given the tales he'd heard about the boy evading the Umbu, the special Jonin wasn't sure if that was merely an empty boast or if it had merit. However, his last boast had been the topic of their bet, and that had ended so wonderfully, hadn't it? With a heavy sigh, the Jonin explained. The track around this training ground is roughly 16 kilometers long. The average civilian would take 2 hours to run that, if they were able to keep going for the entire length. Not at all likely. The average academy graduate can usually do it in only an hour at a moderated pace. You failed at taijutsu and are reported by the instructor to have the worst physical conditioning out of your peers. You may be faster on your feet, but the goal of long-distance running isn't speed outright. It is speed over time, meaning that if you need a break to catch your breath, then you are pushing too hard, and need to slow your pace. Having to stop when being pursued is one of the first weaknesses of a protection detail, which is why most of the royal or wealthy clients will ride shoulder carts when being escorted. Fortunen can carry one of those, with a passenger inside it, over 10 times the speed that a civilian with no regular exercise could possibly run, and still not need to stop for breaks any more than usual. When training by running long distances, the goal is to build up that. Endurance is the key. Naruto was almost shocked at the thoroughness of his explanation of long-distance running. Once more the closet perv was outdoing his future memories' expectations. As part of teaching you a taijutsu style, I will require you to perform physical exercise as I assign it. The first thing I will be assigning starts tomorrow. From now on, every morning, you are going to run that track once before you eat breakfast. And you will not run at your full speed, you need to pace yourself. Run at about 3/4 of your fastest speed. When you can easily finish the track in half an hour at that, without the need to catch your breath afterwards, then start running it twice. Ano, why are you going so far for a bet? I mean, you're teaching me a jutsu that wasn't part of the deal and you're making sure I know things and explaining why, and? The look on the boy's face as he asked the question was almost as pitiful as the question itself. Ebisu really had a hard time not seeing the honorable child he was already hired to train, reflected in his newest student. Had no one ever explained things to the kid? Naruto, when we made that bet, I agreed to take you as my student. Even if it is only for something as trivial as a bet, I don't take that lightly. That is why I was entrusted with the Hokage's own heir, the child of his deceased firstborn son. And while I only agreed to 10 lessons, those lessons have some very specific requirements, many of which I simply can't meet if I am teaching you as you are now. Thusly, I must teach you from where you are now, until you reach the point in which I will be able to complete each lesson. I understand that some may not have held teaching as a standard to be lifted, but I did not get to where I am through taking the easy route. It was only a little scarring, but the Jonin opened up a lecture he had planned on giving his own team, when he taught one. He had prepared it long in advance, back when he was still a member of his genin squad. Hard work is something my sensei drilled into each of his students, and is the only true shortcut to strength. But hard work isn't just about training your body, it is about putting all of your effort behind everything you do. It is much like how a child will put everything they are into to what they are doing, from playing at the playgrounds, to throwing a tantrum, from being happy to being sad. The youngest children have yet to learn how to hold back their efforts and become lazy or content. They will always try their hardest and cry their hardest when the time calls for it. True hard work is when you can try your hardest at everything in the way those children do. To be fully invested in every aspect of your life and community. That is the Jonin had to give a wry grin, as his teammates' words found their way out of his mouth. The power of youth. Naruto looked at his temporary sensei as if he had grown a second head. The Jonin, which he had gained some respect for as a teacher, was now spouting that same youth crap as bushy brows and super bushy brows. What the hell was going on? He wasn't one of them in the future the Genin could remember. Seeing the boy's strong reaction, Ebisu could only assume the Genin had met, or at least seen his teammate before. Feeling one's eye twitch wasn't that uncommon for those who knew Mato Guy. First in irritation at him, then in despair at his continued behavior, and most pleasantly in laughter at the reaction of others who were just meeting the man. Allowing himself to have an amused smile, the Jonin explained to Naruto exactly how he knew the man in green tights. Once the boy was calmed down, he continued his educating. Explaining how the jutsu he had taught Naruto was both part of the 10th lesson he'd asked for, to maintain his kunai by not having to use them as projectiles, and how it related to the chakra control refinements he needed before being able to move on. He also informed the Genin that he would be teaching him another variant of the shadow clone. When the boy gained a suspicious look, Ebisu stated in no uncertain terms that he would only teach him the variant once he had been officially enlisted into the Chunin selection exam. He would be teaching him the explosive variant of both, explosive clone and explosive projectile clone. Neither of them would be one of the 4 jutsu he had agreed to teach either because he already had an idea of which jutsu he wanted to teach the boy. The explosive clone. That was way cooler than anything Naruto had ever learned. Even from what he learned in his last life, well, as far as he could remember. There was something about a balloon and a toad, but for the life of him, the vessel just couldn't figure out what putting a toad inside a balloon had to do with anything. Other than that, it was something the toad hermit had taught him. And he taught the 4th. So it had to have been something cool. Meh, he'd remember it eventually. So he moved on, and listened to the man explaining things to him. Ebisu continued to tell him why he was willing to teach Naruto yet another extra jutsu. And the answer was advertising. Because the exam was so public and had so many spectators from all over the 5 nations and their surrounding smaller states, it became an important resource to the village. The showing there had to be of quality. The better they performed, the more people would hire them. And that meant everything. Shinobi were paid to exist by the daimyo. But that was only really for a few elite, which were meant to be his personal guard. The village, on the other hand, was funded by clients. They paid for a mission, a tax went to the daimyo and a tax went to the village funds, and the rest was paid almost directly to the shinobi who performed them. Based on the amount of taxes the daimyo received, he may pay more or less to fund the village. The mission tax and the daimyo's funding were what allowed them to operate. By funding the academy, and paying village's own required missions, at cost to the village itself. This included routine patrols and gate duty, as well as the TNI department. It also funded a percentage towards stipends such as the Orphans Fund created after the event 12 years ago, and for retired or wounded shinobi who needed to be supplemented until the village could place them in another profession. Most of the injured ones were either mended and sent back out, or an agent in the village found them new jobs. Most of the oldest or more capable injured were put in the Ambu training corps, as anyone good enough to train them and not injured would be in the field. The daimyo himself could also order a mission, and paid very highly for it to be completed. If, however, he thought it would be done better by someone else, then he was more than allowed to hire others. And so, with almost all of their prospective clientele in attendance, their good performances were a must. Therefore, any team not ready to excel would be held back from the exams. Of course, the exams were not the only way to become a chunin. While there was an exam every 6 months, only about half the chunin in the village were promoted by exam. Many were promoted either for excellent work that almost demanded it, or during field command. Others, while not excelling at any one thing, completed a spectrum of chunin-level training courses. As it worked out, with the chunin selection exams you were promoted on your performance in the areas a shinobi worked at. Most of the time it only required higher genin-level skills, and the right mindset. In a field promotion or rewarded promotion, it was based on in-field actions that may or may not be entirely about not panicking or good judgment. The spectrum promotion wasn't like that. While the others required you to have the mindset and maybe passable chunin skills in only a few areas, The Spectrum promotion required you to have fully Chunin level skills in almost all aspects while reaching to have passable Jonin level skills in a few. The Jonin exam was the exact opposite of that, where you were promoted mainly by Spectrum in an exam, and only rarely by other means. These were Tokubetsu Jonin. Ebisu was one of those promoted by other means, and he only personally knew a few others promoted like him, including his teammate Ginma and that woman, but there were around a dozen or so in the village. Once the Jonin had explained to Naruto how the exam really worked, he set the boy to working on the jutsu he'd given him, intentionally neglecting to tell the boy how much more important it was for his teammate to take the public exam for the publicity. Ebisu knew for almost certain that the village council would be pushing for the Hokage to order the Uchiha into the exam, and that meant Hatake would know too, and would focus on his main student. Thanks to a certain acquaintance of his, Ebisu also knew that Naruto's own performance could jeopardize the chance of the Uchiha passing either of the first two stages. The Hokage wouldn't officially arrange the exams for a few months, but the next one was scheduled to be held here. He only learned that they were planning so early because that contact had been recruited already. It was whispered that the whole thing was supposed to be rigged so that the Uchiha would make it to the finals. But Ebisu couldn't believe that was possible now that he knew who else was on the boy's team. His acquaintance had told him what she'd heard about the first exam, and even asked for some ideas on the second. Thinking about it now, the Jonin decided to make a few extra suggestions. After a few tries, the blonde had created a shadow clone rock in his palm. While it wasn't ready to be field tested, it did display the memory recall he had desired. Having served its purpose, there was no longer any reason to work on it at the moment. The child had it down enough so that he could practice on his own. It was time to catch the boy up on everything. Having Naruto make several shadow clones, Ebisu did the same. Each of his clones took one or two of Naruto's, heading out into the training ground to find each of them their own spot to sit and discuss the nature of being a shinobi. Each group would cover it all, and each location would help the different clones to form different thoughts and ask different questions. This was even more so for the clones who had more than one student. Each clone would ask a question the other hadn't thought of, and that would cause that one to think of even more. He had a basic outline written out for not each clone, but each location in the training ground, with examples to pick from and illustrations already placed at the chosen spot. As he had planned, the clones learned all of the basics at least 3 times over before they dispersed. In most, it began with him explaining how chakra works, the parts of spirit and the parts of physical energy, as well as a brief explanation of the natural chakra around them. From there it would go in only a few directions, one being the need for the body and mind to be balanced, or how important it is to use them both and ensure a proper exercise is achieved for them. Another was pointed into how chakra was used, from the way it was shaped, to how verbal commands and hand seals influenced the efficiency of it. How they were not necessary, and in order to become a Jonin there were even a set of jutsu that must be performed without them called the frequently flying 5. He explained how chakra was formed in the body and how it was used in jutsu, how it could be added to tools, or even made into sealed tags and scrolls. He explained the difference between shape and elemental jutsu, and the difference between basic elemental manipulation that was practiced with the first 5 forms of leaf and palm exercises and the advanced elemental manipulation, which were trained in the usage of extreme variations of the first 5 forms or by using certain jutsu, the advanced affinity few. These were required to actually convert your chakra into the element of choice. The Jonin explained how each element was a counterpart or complement to another. He explained the weaknesses of each and the most likely ways they were to be used. Naruto himself and his various clones had all remembered this conversation from last time while they were eating, but this time it was much more. Many more details and little explanations for why one thing does this and another thing does that. And when one of the genin had a question, instead of brushing it off or giving a half-assed answer, he changed his entire lesson over to an explanation to cover his query. And each of them had pictures or examples. They used what Naruto asked to further the topic, and even asked the boy questions for him to answer, basing the next explanation on his own words or examples so that he could understand it in his own way. He moved on to how jutsu, shinobi and missions were all ranked. During this section the Jonin explained the commonly grouped jutsu, starting with the Academy 3, all of which were normally required before graduation. The Chakra Control Collection, which several other clones had covered even during the last section of the lectures. He explained the Essential 8 and the Traveling 10, an assortment of jutsu taught to all fresh chunin, and usually picked up by most of the older genin. The Essential 8 included Rope Escape, self-explanatory, Detailed Detecting, which allowed a shinobi to use their chakra in a way to help them augment their observational skills and memorize details more effectively. It wasn't as effective as sensory enhancement but still improved their abilities vastly. Silent Footstep with the complementing genjutsu stepping in secret, this was a skill for silent walking. and the genjutsu silenced the sounds you made, emphasizing how the art of deception and stealth was the main core foundation of being a shinobi. Seal tag activation, genjutsu release, and wire use all minor skills that most learned in the academy or shortly after making genin. The map of killing strikes, which was simply basic anatomy. And finally, the shunshin, a jutsu that allowed you to move instantaneously for a short distance. All except the last one were normally learned as genin, and Ebisu had it on good authority that the Uchiha had already learned them, while Naruto thought back and recognized some of them from Sasuke team's arsenal. Continuing on, the Jonin explained that these were some of the things Naruto would need to learn soon. And if he hadn't learned them in a month or so, Ebisu said he may even give Naruto the instructions of some of them. The Traveling Ten, however, were a jumble of D-rank jutsu that most genin could use to simply make life easier. While taught immediately after promotion, they were essentially unnecessary. He covered the advanced affinity few, and again some of his clones had been over this already. They were specific jutsu taught to enhance the advanced affinity elemental training. The frequently flying 5, also covered previously as the 5-bullet jutsu, requiring 3 of the 5 to be performed seamlessly to make jonin. The major miscellaneous, composed of 10 jutsu, 2 from each element, which were the first major jutsu taught to those who had each elements. Then he covered the specific career paths of shinobi, from frontline fighters to medical nin and genjutsu specialists, learning the major miscellaneous, medical musts, or instrumental illusions respectively. Tracker nin who evolve into hunter nin only after learning the hunter nin have-to-haves. He explained the umbu, the TNI department, and what they really are, and the village council, as well as the once-used military police. He even went into the various clans and why and how they became parts of the village, covering all their basic information and their most commonly known customs. Each of his clones covered all of these topics. While some focused on one or another with more effort, each topic was covered entirely when added together. It may not have been the full academy education, but Ebisu prided himself in how he had stripped out only the most useful and essential information about being a genin. There was no way he would have covered it all, but he had planned on only covering chakra and its uses for today's lecture. The Jonin was more than surprised when, at the end of the lecture, he discovered that his clones had managed to move on to the jutsu groups and even into the career paths and village clans. He had planned to cover those topics later on, and still needed to cover international diplomacy for missions out of the village, a brief course on the geography of the world and internal laws and structure of the village. But from what he'd seen today, he was certain if the clone method worked he'd be able to cover all of those in only 1 or 2 more lessons. It appeared the genin soaked all of it up like a sponge. While he would enjoy stroking his ego with this, the fact he taught the village dunce how to understand it all, Ebisu knew full and well that the boy had been more than able to understand the concepts on his own. In the time the clones had been learning, the originals were having a different lecture. This one was entirely based on the benefits of meditation and calm. How being level-headed and focused improved every aspect of his training. Ebisu explained at length the various methods for meditation, calming the mind and achieving focus. Near the end of the lecture, he had Naruto perform each method he explained in turn. During this time, he also gave the boy a much more detailed lesson about the chakra control collection, leaf floating, tree walking, water walking, chakra sensory and sensory enhancements, and finally the chakra submersion meditation, in which you allowed your chakra to flow through the environment around you and feel its existence. This was usually done under a waterfall, but could also be done on other types of elements. While he hadn't actually taught the boy how to do it, it would come. And sooner rather than later. When it was finally time to finish the discussions, the clones all prepared. Ebisu had Naruto sit on one of the thicker training posts and take himself into the deepest meditation he'd achieved thus far. One by one the genin clones dispelled, pausing for several minutes between each to allow the boy to accept the memories before moving on. Ebisu's own would dispel later when he himself could meditate. As he watched the boy absorbing the memories, he saw the mixtures of emotion and apprehension, understanding and excitement. The boy displayed a vast array of strong emotions which told the Jonin stories after stories of what the boy had been through in his childhood. When finished, Ebisu instructed Naruto to go over his memories and meditate on them. Then accepted his own clones, in the same way his student had. Each memory of each discussion was like a needle in his mind, and a tug on his heart. The boy had learned so much more than planned, and was so focused on learning that Ebisu's small remaining prejudices towards the boy dissolved in his admiration of the perfect student. He could barely understand how the academy could have held the boy back so much. And he was beginning to suspect that the boy, while far more intelligent than expected, was illiterate. It was obvious he had trouble reading some of the illustrations the Jonin had included. But the way the boy quickly figured out each word he didn't know solely based on context shamed the village educational system to its core. As time passed, hunger set in. Standing from their places on the training posts, the two shinobi headed out to the next training ground out. Number 7. Taking out a bento Ebisu had prepared, they ate near the memorial stone. The Jonin had also thought of a lecture to cover proper eating, but when the boy's first bites were the vegetables, he found himself asking about the boy's diet directly. At first it hadn't always been ramen. When the Hokage first gave him his apartment, Naruto had bought many other foods. But the meats always had little worms inside them, and the worms made him sick when he ate them. The boy had assumed it was the worms because he'd eaten other meats before, and they never made him sick. His veggies, on the other hand, always made him dizzy. It might have been because he didn't cook it right. The ones old man Tucci put in his ramen were good. The hungry teen always felt more awake after eating there. He only bought milk once a month because if he bought more than the one it would make him need to use the bathroom too often. Now, he mostly just stuck with cup ramen. It was cheap, and he didn't get sick eating it. Ebisu had been convinced. He would be taking over the boys' shopping until the Hokage fixed this too. It was no small wonder how Naruto had survived this long. Deciding not to go into his discussion over food, it wasn't as if the boy had had much choice in his eating habits. Ebisu instead pointed to the stone they ate at, and asked if Naruto knew what that was. Naruto looked back at it, and memories of his time on Team 7 flared to life. Yeah, it's the Hero's Stone. The memorial that helps us remember all of those lost in the line of duty to the village. The genin briefly wondered if he would have been added to it after he died at the Valley of the Ends. Naruto's reply was a solemn one, but Ebisu hadn't expected him to know. Then, seeing the look of remorse on the boy's face, the elder shinobi had to wonder how many times the boy had looked on it, hoping to see a name, something that would give him a family. While at the same time hoping not to find anything because it meant he could still find his parents alive. After having eaten, Ebisu told the genin it was time for the initial taijutsu training to start. Returning to the tent post, he explained that the first thing they would do was evaluate his taijutsu by having a spar. His stances were wrong, his movements were wrong. The only thing Naruto had going for him was that his speed, creative comebacks, and durability made his self-deprecating style effectively unpredictable. As they spared, Ebisu had to acknowledge that the boy had worked hard on his speed and strength. But he could tell the boy had no clue about the real advantages behind the chakra walking methods. It was only slightly covered in the discussions between their collective clones. And while the genin would eventually be able to figure it out on his own, Ebisu felt slightly vindicated of his past opinions of the boy. Explaining to him how to channel his chakra into the muscles only took a few moments. The boy's speed and strength almost quadrupled instantly. Since the spar had dwindled into a lesson on chakra manipulation, Ebisu simply shifted pace and began coaching the boy through a few stances. The boy had been sabotaged here. Even so, Ebisu was disappointed in Naruto. Shouldn't he have been able to see that the other students were doing it differently? Then Ebisu realized who his instructor had been for taijutsu. The little genin had placed so much faith in Mizuki, only for it to cut him back time and again. It seemed this would be another chance to use the methods of teaching which Naruto's clones allowed. After having the blonde clones move in the correct ways, Ebisu explained to them how each movement was meant to flow into the next. Having a clone show a single move to a corresponding clone at the same time, they worked through all the basic academy stances. He also explained how the physical movements didn't carry over. This meant that Naruto would have to go over all of these himself, every day on his own. When asked why they used clones if that was the case, Ebisu flat out told the boy they weren't doing this for the exercise. That was Naruto's responsibility. They had used the clones so he could show him all of the movements. Learning how to move was as much mental as physical. And because the original performed the moves with his real body, while his clones were being explained in detail what each step did, and why, he would get a much better understanding of each movement. Once completed, Naruto should be more than capable of practicing on his own, without being shown new steps or needing corrected further the way most academy students did. It took Naruto a few moments to go through each form in the corrected movements using his new understanding of each step and pass. Satisfied that Naruto had it down, Ebisu declared that they needed to work on a most major hole in his style. Defense. Why defense? Because his style involved the use of clones in battle. If a clone gets hit once, it will dispel. Think Naruto, if your enemy cannot touch you, they cannot beat you, and if they can't beat you, that makes you the eventual winner. No matter how else the fight ends. And if your clones don't get dispelled by being hit anymore, they can win a fight for you while you finish the mission. Naruto was convinced and complied when instructed to take his forehead plate off. He made the two clones requested. Then he put the plate back on. This training was in the most basic form of defense, evasion. Naruto, the one with the forehead protector, was only allowed to dodge attacks. He couldn't block, counter, or attack back. And to the real genin's horror, if the clones managed to knock him out, they would be treated to all the ramen they could eat. The clones attacked hard and fast. Naruto took more damage than he dodged at first. But after a few frantic beatings, he began moving much faster. Not only was this from putting chakra into his speed, but also from the fear of being hurt more. Ebisu's comment that pain was an excellent motivator didn't help. After about half an hour of this, the Jonin called the chase to a halt. He allowed the boy to rest for a few moments, and explained to him how his movements had worked or hadn't. Once Naruto was rested up, he repeated the training. This time Naruto was able to dodge most of the hits, but the clones were also moving faster than before. He let another half hour pass before the Jonin told him that it was enough for the day. He would be required to go over all his forms and movements once every day. Ebisu suggested doing them on water once a day as well. However, he should do this dodging training only once per week, and never with more than 3 clones. Promising to move on to blocks, parries, and counters the next time, they left the training grounds in search of the shopping district. Each shop they stopped at had been expecting them, and while normally they were open until sunset, which was still a few hours away, they all seemed to be empty. It was slightly eerie to Naruto. Almost worse than the glares, the few people who were out hastily made their way once they noticed who was coming. Ebisu took Naruto to several shops. First was the tailor, who measured Naruto and took the requests for his outfit. Ebisu requested a fully equipped Umbu uniform made to his fit. While it was missing the flak jacket, it came with a dense male sleeveless overcoat slightly resembling a black flak anyway. And when told that he wasn't going to be charged for this out of pocket, Naruto ordered a new orange outfit as well. I'm not going to get all dressed up just to paint a fence or catch that blasted cat. The uniform you asked for is good for real missions, but when it comes to those D-ranks there's no point in wearing it. Not able to fault the child's logic, the Jonin wholeheartedly supported Naruto's second uniform, and made his own alterations to Naruto's requested outfit. Naruto didn't hear anything too different, so he let the Jonin speak. He had to know what he was doing, right? While those were being made, the duo went to the next shop, a seal master's shop. They weren't actually seal masters, that was simply the name of the type of shop. It wasn't that hard to make sealed tags, and usually Jonin could create their own easily, but many genin dropouts or injured wouldn't have enough skill to teach, and while learning their next trade or job would be able to come here, where under the supervision of an adept they could make the tags. They made everything from exploding to chakra-suppressing tags. There were a vast amount of tags to be made, and Naruto had only known about 2 or 3 before that morning. The explosive tag he knew. The flash tag created a bright flash of light, usually sent up into the air like a flare, but could also be used in trap making. The concussion tag created a burst of pressure that almost always gave the target a concussion. The chakra tag held spare chakra, and much like a soldier pill would help replenish the user. Chakra suppressing tag did the opposite of that. It suppressed the chakra. Gravity tags were how Lee had made his weights so powerful, and were almost always used with movement resistance tags, which had nothing to do with air or skin or anything Naruto would have thought. No, they operated by inertia or somehow restricting gravity itself to the object? The real understanding of it was beyond Naruto. Barrier tags were easily explained and usually could only be used in groups. These ones were made for various levels by various skill levels. While the other tags verified in small ways, they were mostly only the size of the resulting use or the trigger of it. Barriers, on the other hand, had hundreds of different variables, and could be used for hundreds of different purposes. Some sealed sounds into a room, others sealed chakra or demons like ghosts and things, and still even more could seal solid things like people or water or even germs. These were the only tags that Naruto didn't receive. Ebisu had ordered several of each of the others, and explained how each was used and how they could be incorporated into traps. He also ordered several sealing scrolls, which he cautioned Naruto to never try sealing a sealed tag into. He had purchased the materials for Naruto to begin making his own with as well, but the Jonin flat out told him it would take months before he would be ready to even start learning. That done, they headed to the toolsmiths. Getting his kunai and shuriken was a simple number asked for. But that wasn't all they made. The toolsmiths made many different tools, not just kunai and shuriken. They also made shinobi wire, weights, and bracers that were sent to the trailers, spring-loaded launchers, and many other things. The toolsmiths did make most of the blades, but they weren't swordsmiths. These were usually made separate and delivered to the tool shops to be sold. Here, Naruto got his new set of kunai, shuriken, wire, and his new bracers for the Umbu uniform. He was told to wait on the weights until he was up to Ebisu's standard of conditioning. He also got a windmill and a pair of giant shuriken and a tanto, a short sword that was almost small enough to be a knife. This was going to be used for any hand-to-hand clash with larger blades because it could be repaired easily, and with the sparing usage kunai and shuriken received, they weren't near the quality of an actual sword. Which explained why being a swordsmith took so much more work. Sealing all of his new tools into one of the sealing scrolls he'd received, they headed on to the herbalists and apothecaries. There were several of these shops to stop at, and each one had different items, from numbing salves to acid powder, poisons of all kinds and medicines of all kinds. They had soldier pills and emergency field rations that were able to power a jonin for days. They picked up 3 or 4 things at each of the few smaller shops, and over a dozen things at each of the bigger 3. Naruto recognized these 3 from the discussions earlier that day as being the clan shops of the Inoshikacho. As they selected each item, Naruto was told of its use, its make, and its counters. By the time they left, his head was almost swimming. And finally it was back to the tailor's. The battle suit was standard black umbu uniform with the mail overcoat and bracers. All of it had been made with chakra-conductive threads and metals so that it would adapt a transformation, or a hidden veil genjutsu more effectively. The only thing truly missing was the mask. His new orange outfit was a 4-piece set. It had his normal orange pants with a long black stripe down each side. A long-sleeved mesh undershirt, made densely enough it was almost as tough as the mail. An orange jacket much like his first one, but this one didn't have a white collar. Instead it came right up to his neck, tightly binding in place around it. Its arms were also blue like the shoulders were. The red Uzumaki spiral had to be patched on. It also came with a bandage set that went under and on top of it in places. The bandages held pockets for weights and helped to brace his flesh much like combat tape. They were made of a durable armored threads. Not as good as mesh but much denser and layered, making it about the same. After some final adjustments were made, they went to cash out. And like with each of the other shops before, the prices, influenced by Ebisu's presence, were considerably lower than Naruto had been used to. Ebisu's initial response to Naruto's reaction was heated, but that was why he was here, wasn't it? True to his word, the previous day, Ebisu had told the Hokage about Naruto's treatment. He had been told to assess it himself, and report back before any punishment could be performed. And so he had. Today, as Naruto waited for his sensei, Ebisu infiltrated each shop and inspected what he could. There was much more to tell about a shop than they realized. He had requisitioned a few assistants from his acquaintance, and they were able to tell him exactly what money had come from the genin, and where he had been in the shop. In some of them he never made it past the entrance, but the fact he had entered was proof enough he'd been turned away. More so, transactions from one of the tools shops had him leaving with medals that smelled exactly like the scrap bin in the smithy itself, while the money that had come from his pocket was more than enough to buy the highest quality they had. This resulted in the Hokage himself finding all of the involved shops. The monetary compensation was placed in a fund which Ebisu was currently using to supply Naruto with what he needed at the correct prices. Not that any money was actually transferred. It was more like a tab being opened with a positive balance. Once everything was gathered, Ebisu topped the whole shopping spree off, with a gift of his own. One not purchased by the villagers' greed, but instead traded for with a promise of meal, company, and booze, a lot of booze. For both of them. A bingo book. One made up to date by the TNI department. Holding more than the standard intel, it told of each bingo with all the info they could verify. Down to known associates, and even which foods they ate. It even included theories on what strategies would be best to use, as well as what to recognize as a reason to playing just run. Ebisu had considered telling Naruto that these weren't handed out to just anybody, most were actually made by the user, but the Jonin was also certain that as it had been included in the bet, he'd have to teach Naruto how to make one instead. So he'd asked her. She had truly put her full effort behind it once he mentioned who it was for. Ebisu had to give her credit. The bingo book was far better than he'd seen before. And the cost wasn't as bad as she could have demanded what were a few drinks and a dinner anyway. Finished shopping, they headed to Naruto's apartment, where Ebisu performed a check on all of the genin's old tools. And after learning what he had about the boy's diet, he checked his food as well, allowing one of the assistants he'd kept with him for just this purpose to slither into the boy's foods and pantry, and finally his garbage. The genin never even knew the creature was there. While the spy was working, he showed Naruto how to maintain his tools and gave a few demonstrations on their use. He also promised to teach him to use them accurately later on. As Ebisu left the boy to the rest of his night, the Jonin decided he was going to need even more attention from the Hokage. His parting words were that the next time Naruto went food shopping or shopping for anything for that matter, he should tell the Jonin, so he could attend. They would be meeting again the day after tomorrow to set up their training schedule so it would correspond with the one Kakashi had in place. The Hokage's office was open and bright when he arrived. The third did keep long hours, but it was also empty. Void of paperwork or personnel, the office stood open with only the elderly Hokage and his desk. The door closed ominously as he entered. For a brief flare of chakra, the room was ablaze in intricate patterns of the vast ceiling arrays decorating every wall. You must have enjoyed having the day off, while poor Gemna cared for Konohamaru-chan. The elder was standing at the window facing it, but the Jonin knew he truly watched the glass, allowing his eyes to focus on his office. Ebisu knew what would come next. He had explained the whole bet to the Hokage, and the third had laughed it off, already knowing about it from his own secrets. It was the one reason he had so much leeway with Naruto's education. Not that he would tell the boy or his own charge, but the bet had been made a B-rank secret. Pending the discoveries it revealed, it would possibly be made A-rank. And only Naruto was allowed to share it. He had been expressly told to keep it hidden from the boy's Jonin. The third had been kind enough to explain away the secrecy to his grandson, but it went far deeper than the simple pride of the boy's official Jonin. That started with the treatment and correction of the shops. It ended with his status as a Jinchuriki. Today I watched as a boy, harmfully neglected by the teachers and peers in his life, was given the first true education he had ever had. I watched as a man I know was biased to his plight, began to feel the pain that I see every day in my adopted son. The Jonin swallowed his nerves and kept his jaw tight, as the Hokage turned on him with disgust at what he'd learned. The aged shinobi knew. Everything Ebisu had learned had been somehow conveyed to the raging elder. And fury was incarnate. Within moments of his arrival, the Hokage's trusted educator could see shop owners being dragged bodily out of their homes from the window of the office. Some were violently brought to justice as they were dragged screaming to the streets. The one doing it was also recognized. She had easily cast a genjutsu to keep bystanders unaware as the shopkeepers begged for help. No one would see them, no one would hear them, no one would save them. One by one the earth clones that woman had created gathered them and dragged them into the pits of hell they would reside in until she and Ibiki killed them. The next day no one would know where they went, and their loved ones would soon be visited for counseling by Yamanaka no doubt. Taking his seat at the large desk, the cold-faced shinobi began talking. Explaining almost as Ebisu had to Naruto, why they were going to die. The spy Ebisu had delivered had found the traces of no less than 100 different poisons, only a few truly fatal. But many were placed there over several different lengths of time ago. The elder personally knew the boy hadn't replaced the garbage bin since moving in. It was only Ebisu's bringing the issue to light that had warranted a full investigation. In the short time since that first spy reported in, all of them were deployed. Not just her summons, which had already reported similar, if not the exact same poisons in the shops Ebisu had investigated that morning, but also the best trackers from the Inuzuka and Aburame. It had been less than an hour before they had identified the scents of the ones who used the poisons, and some of them even carried them still, including the hateful wife of an innocent shopkeeper. Those that weren't dragged out would be dealt with, but these were only the ones where true, hard and solid evidence had been found. This wasn't the first time he'd heard about Naruto's nutritional issue though. When he had first learned of the boy's diet, he found out simply because a small girl whose father owned Naruto's favorite stand had come in bawling when she heard what Naruto ate. And when he told her that he had no control over what the boy wanted to eat, nor could he make sure on a daily basis that the boy didn't let his food go bad, it became known as the time a child had thrown things off his own desk at him in his own office. And gotten away with it. In truth, he had been so pleased that she cared about Naruto-chan's well-being, that he honestly wanted to reward her. Instead, she was sent to a cell for a week. But he was concerned by what she'd said. So he had sent a Chunin to the boy's place to check it out, and to see what foods the boy did have. The only thing not rotten or spoiled in some way was the cup ramen, of which he had an abundant supply. He had known the boy was being overcharged, and mistreated at some shops. But he would never have thought they would outright turn him away or sell him bad food. And it was well within their rights to demand whatever price they wanted. He had unfortunately assumed the boy's love for the ramen stand had been because the girl would often play with him when she was younger. That and the fact they gave all her ruined ramen to him for free when she was starting out. After visiting him and explaining how to properly refrigerate and keep the food he bought, the Hokage moved on. Gazing in on him, he saw the boy had all but stopped even buying the foodstuffs that had gone bad. This led him to asking the Inoshikacho Nutritional Corps, aka the Jonin's wives, to create some special spices which he commissioned to be added to all of the boys' meals at the ramen stand. Her father picked her up from the Umbu a week after her outburst, with the first batch of spices and a check for their ongoing E-rank mission. He had made a point to personally pay them for a case of coupons, made specifically so he could send the boy there if it had been too long since his last healthy meal. So the boy would be certain to get the nutrition he needed. That one case had lasted for the last 6 years and still had at least another year's worth left. They would receive the coupon and cash it in at the bank, later that week, to be paid for the meal. He was also well aware of the fact that the two working there had taken to giving the boy free bowls too. Learning what he had today, the Hokage understood why the girl was so upset. He decided that he would be making another investment in their shop sometime in the next few days. Turning away from the jonin standing before him, Sarutobi ordered him to provide a full and complete training course for the genin. And when the chunin exams came, he expected the boy to be promotable, or Ebisu would face dire consequences. Uchiha Sasuke enjoyed the texture of the bark on his back, the grass in his fingers, the warmth of the sun shining on his bandaged skin. He was leaning against one of the many trees in Training Ground 7, waiting for his team. The Uchiha thought to himself. He was on a team with him. The indignant boy remembered the savage beating he had received only yesterday. It angered him to no end that his skills had been unable to even defend against the dead last. But also, he was excited. The blonde had held back. He had somehow fooled everybody as he became stronger. How? Looking over at the would-be Kunoichi, he thought back to the night before. At least now he understood why he was on a team with such a pathetic teammate as her. He remembered her coming to the hospital to visit him, and for some reason the nurse had given her charge of him. She was supposed to see to it that he got home safe. At least it got him out of the hospital, he had thought. Yet, when he got home, he told her she could go and began his way to the Uchiha dojo only to be yelled at as if she could give him orders. No training. You need to rest up and eat, and then, you're going to bed. If you even think of training when you're so hurt, you'll be back in the hospital for the rest of the night. He knew by the way she spoke that nurse had actually given her the authority to have him taken back by medics if she reported it. Besides, he could use the rest if he were going to be really tested tomorrow. Following him inside, Sakura had him show her to the kitchen. I'll make you something to eat. You need to eat your fill tonight because sensei said it would be best to skip breakfast in the morning. That was how he found himself eating with one of the few people he actively ran from. It wasn't that he needed to run so much as she was annoying. He actually preferred Naruto's constant attempts to beat him, over the drooling of his female classmates. When he finished eating, Sakura came back from the restroom, and told him she had drawn him a bath. And if that wasn't enough, she pulled him to his feet and began undoing his bandages. While she did this, Sasuke was certain she was mumbling criticisms on the quality of how it was wrapped. It had been a simple civilian wrap. Shinobi bandaging was only slightly different. Once the bandages were off, he waited for her to leave before getting into the bath. He still thought he was going to be peeked at, but a few moments of making sure she was gone and was able to relax. The soak was good for his injuries, and here, he thought over how his other teammate had beaten him. There was no way he had just gotten that much stronger, and that's when he realized that the boy had been acting weak on purpose. He hadn't even passed normally, so that he had been hiding his real strength. The shinobi way was the art of deception, and it seemed Naruto knew it. It also explained why Naruto was able to trick so many in the village, and how he somehow managed to evade the Umbu for as long as he could. Many of their classmates had thought he was exaggerating or just plain lying when he told them. But now Sasuke had no doubts about it. When he exited the bath, he was startled to find out that his useless teammate was still there. And it only became more surprising when she took out a pouch of ointments and salves. And again he found himself put out by a girl he avoided. He sat there in only his small clothes as she applied the medical creams on the majority of his body. Then she rewove his bandages in a very different form than they had been at the hospital. He had to admit it was a much better one. He had already begun feeling relief. Next, the new, pink mystery led her properly wrapped ward to his bedroom to be tucked in, much to the indignation and resistance of an even worse humiliated Sasuke. If I come back, Uchiha Sasuke, and those bandages have been disturbed, I will make sure you stay in the hospital for the next week. Got it? And for the first time, Sasuke found fear for one of the girls who chased him in the academy. When he had awakened, he had been pleasantly surprised. It was as if all of his aches had disappeared overnight. And they literally had. Remembering her earlier words about not eating because of the test their sensei was going to give them, the drowsy genin decided to eat a quick meal. There was no point in skipping a breakfast for her stupid diet. When Sakura arrived that morning, she changed his bandages again, and this time she used combat tape on top of it, bracing all his joints and muscles. It restricted his movement a little, but on the whole he felt as if he'd gotten stronger through this ordeal. Sasuke had to admit that she had some uses. As she told him on the way here, apparently her top academic marks included how the body worked and the field medical skills, but they had not been used in practice. So she only knew the hows of the medical bandaging for shinobi, and hadn't actually done it on anyone before. As his teammate babbled away, Sasuke thought over what she had told him, keeping one of his ears turned towards her incessant voice in case she said anything else worth hearing. He had never given much thought to the medical field. He knew his path was on the front lines, fighting, not in a tent fixing. But the little details she had memorized paid off big time when he needed them. Even as he walked to the training ground, he could feel his body healing. A tingle there from the ointment, an itch here from clotted blood over his many lacerations. If he was ever hurt, he would need medical aid like this to get him back in the fight that much sooner. So maybe the dobe was right. He could use his teammates to help him prepare for his eventual clash with his elder brother. Sakura was a good bet for the medical needs his many battles would require. Not like he'd get out of every fight without a scratch. If he wanted to grow stronger, he needed to fight strong opponents, and that meant fighting against those who could cause him as much damage as he could cause them. And speaking of stronger opponents, could he really keep calling him the dobe? How had Naruto been so fast? How had he grabbed him with his foot? The beating he dished out was far more than anything the boy had been capable of in the academy. Just how much had the boy held back? How strong could he be? The genin was actually excited to test himself against Naruto, and not have to hold back for fear of setting his training back. Yes, Uchiha Sasuke could use this team. Uzumaki Naruto was not a morning person, well, not at first. It normally took him a few minutes to get going. Today should have been an exception. Days like this, when he was certain he would be showing the world how awesome he was, were supposed to be easy to wake up to. Today was not easy to wake up to. He had been up all night, in fact. Well, in a way. His clones had been out setting all the traps he'd planned out, and many others they had come up with on their own. This time around wasn't going to go the way it had last time. He had come up with the perfect lines for his introduction, and he was ready to attack Bastard Sensei with vengeance for last time. The fog over his memories seemed to begin lifting as he learned to meditate. He had spent most of the morning on one of 10 posts in Training Ground 17, rightfully named the Circle of Pillars. That had been just after he had ran his first morning lap and eaten breakfast. Yeah, it was good to know the future. Anyway, he meditated over his memories, not only of the future, but also of the traps his clones had lain the night before. It helped that he had used his shadow projectile jutsu, and every single one of them was a clone tool. He had no real tools out there. And while doing that, the clones had figured out how to throw them. He had the jutsu down. Drawing them all on a scroll, he made a very crude map of Training Ground 7. It was a small scroll, thin once rolled. He could easily slip it into Sasuke's pocket later. Addressing it to Sakura-chan, he pocketed his trap map. It was about an hour after they were supposed to meet. That meant they still had a few hours until Sensei showed up. It was time to join his teammates. The excited genin could barely keep his calm as he walked into the training ground. What would they think of his new uniform? He had intentionally worn the outfit Ebisu-sensei had designed for him. Its similarity to the Umbu uniform should make him look more serious about being a shinobi, and would only highlight his improvement. Hopefully it would be enough for them to completely forget who he was before, not that they remembered all the dumb things that had happened to him over the year that hadn't happened yet. It wasn't as if he remembered much of it either, for that matter. He could remember only bits and pieces, but he was certain he'd been humiliated more than a few times. The mission ahead of them, the Chunin exam, he knew he had faced Niji, and that he didn't like him. Something was missing there, and something really bad happening just after, and then boobs. Something to do with blowing a frog up using a balloon. He wasn't sure about that one, but he could clearly remember a giant frog. And then Sasuke. He had left the village, they had fought, and Sasuke had killed him. He didn't know why. He wasn't sure who was right or wrong. But Sasuke had killed him. So it must have been something big. Something that made the team think he had to leave to kill Itachi. Naruto saw the man's face in front of him. It wasn't as blurry as the rest of his memories. But he had no idea where it came from. The upcoming test, on the other hand, was something he clearly remembered. And he didn't want to live down the 1,000 years of death again. And even if he still couldn't remember much about the big mission with the mirrors and swords and things, he was sure whatever it was, the 7 years' bad luck didn't carry over. How many mirrors had he broken for that to keep being such a clear memory? And what the hell was with the mask that kept showing up inside them? Was he going to get super ugly or something? Nah. Couldn't be. He did remember a few things from the mission, though. Words. The words that echoed through his soul. He wasn't sure where he had heard them, but he knew they had meant everything to him when he did. And now he would use them, and all the things he had learned over the last few days, to make an image. An image that would become his new face. His new self. His first step towards becoming Hokage. He had barely stepped into the training ground when the Uchiha forced him to dodge. The boy's foot passed through where his head had been. He had rolled forward into the Uchiha's guard, and as he came up he caught his rival's extended leg before the genin could land from his kick. Lifting him up, Naruto tossed him bodily into a tree. The Uchiha took no time bouncing back to his feet and pressing his attack. Naruto could almost see every move the Uchiha was going to make before he made them, by watching the muscle movements he had learned about the day before. Not only that, but his speed was different. His movements were slow, far slower than they had been in Naruto's memories. That was understandable. He didn't have his Sharingan yet, and he hadn't learned to tree walk either. Naruto vaguely remembered their battle when he died, but only just barely. Sasuke had been able to water walk then. It was no wonder he was so much slower. At least now Naruto understood why Sasuke was able to get so fast. He had been using chakra to make himself faster, like Ebisu had shown him. But now, Naruto was the one who could do it, and Sasuke had no clue that he could. Naruto easily avoided every strike, kick, and lunge Sasuke made at him. Sasuke's movements were growing more and more aggressive, as his face became enraged. Naruto had him beaten, and hadn't even attacked once. So this is what Ebisu-sensei meant by not getting hit? The closet pervert was on to something there. Finished pissing the Uchiha prick off, Naruto went on the offensive. He easily caught one of Sasuke's fists, and slammed his own into the stuck-up team's gut. As the genius curled over, Naruto whispered into his ear. Then the Umbu lookalike picked him up by the back of his pants, noticing the little sticker on the Uchiha's bandages with a suppressed giggle. Discreetly slipping the scroll into the boy's pocket, Naruto tossed him face first at Sakura, knocking them both over. For a moment he saw her surprise, no shock. No absolute complete fucking mind fart. Her mouth was hanging open, her eyes were wide and comically bulged outwards from her face. She didn't even realize what he had done until the Uchiha landed on her. She had just lost all her opinions of him in those few seconds. He caught himself before he actually thought that maybe now she'd go on a date with him. She had made her choice. She wanted Sasuke. And he had died to fulfill that promise. His chances with her were over the moment he had agreed to bring the team back. Even if it hadn't happened yet, he had given up on her. It was time for him to move on. Sasuke was up on his feet in moments. Oddly enough, he dragged Sakura up too. Her eyes looked at the Uchiha in almost as much shock as they had at him. Sasuke, you shouldn't exert yourself so much. Sensei said he had a test for us. Maybe you should be resting up for that instead. The Uchiha's glare at him hardened, and Sakura's look of shock finally came undone as her rage at him expressed itself. What the hell do you think you're doing? Attacking Sasuke like that? Again. You have no right to be telling him to rest, you jerk. Turning back to the Uchiha, she grabbed his arm, and rather forcefully led him back to his spot by a tree. Sasuke, you really need to rest up. You shouldn't be fighting with that idiot in your condition. Don't forget that we still have no idea what Kakashi-sensei's test is going to be. He might want to do a physical exam. The look on the team's face when she began giving him orders was priceless. Naruto actually had trouble holding his laughter in. Once he had control of his vocals again, he spoke. It looks like Sensei is going to be late again. I'm going to take a nap. Sasuke, don't forget what you were told, eh? With another chuckle, the genin lay back and closed his eyes. It was a nice nap that was interrupted. A good, happy, relaxing, comfy, interrupted by a kick to the ribs, nap? Courtesy of a less pretty than earlier Pinkette. It wasn't just him, was it? Or did she actually lose her attractiveness for a few minutes? Holding his side, Naruto climbed to his feet. Good of you to join us, Naruto. The nonchalant tone of voice, the orange book predominantly covering his already masked face, the silver gravity-defying hair. Kakashi-sensei, exactly as Naruto remembered him. It's not noon already, is it? Naruto turned to the Uchiha with his question. His rival simply shrugged. Let's start off by getting to know each other. There's no need to rush into any stressful situations. Their sensei began. Naruto didn't hesitate. He jumped up and began introducing himself. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, training, and learning new things. I hate when people treat me badly because of my birthday being the same day as the festival. At the comment about learning new things, he only heard one snort. I swear Sakura wasn't this mean last time, Naruto thought to himself. His sensei didn't even flinch at the hint about the kyubi. I don't like people who think they're better than others just because they have an advantage that others don't. And I can't forgive anybody who would betray or abandon the people who care about them. He said this. He gave a pointed glare to each of his teammates, making absolutely sure not to look at Sasuke any more than the others. My plan for the future is to become an awesome shinobi by following my 5 shinobi truths, and my 5 guidelines to ninjutsu. As Naruto declared his last statement, he shoved his hand out to count on each finger. First, never give up or go back on your word. This was something he had believed for the longest time, even before the memories. Second, hard work is the only way to become strong. There are no shortcuts to strength. It was kind of funny to think that the so-called shortcut to strength that Ebisu-sensei had been preaching was the same youthful dedication to hard work that had the bushy brows duo so tough. Not a shortcut at all. Third, true strength is found by protecting those precious to you. And fourth, when you have something precious to you, you must protect it. With both arms, with both legs, and with every other part of your body. His memories of that mission, while a blur, rang clearly with those words. Both rules were dear to him, even if he didn't know why. And finally, my 5th nindo. Naruto was ready to see how the Jonin reacted to his own words being parented before he ever said them. Not that he was going to say them exactly. That would be too much of a giveaway. Those who abandon their comrades are worse than the worst scum. Kakashi's reaction was a slight widening of his visible eye, and a narrowing of his peripheral vision as he began to reassess Naruto. Not that Naruto caught either of those. To the genin, his sensei hadn't reacted at all. My 5 guidelines to ninjutsu. 1. A shinobi's path is deception. 2. Always be ready. The best victory is a battle that's won without a fight. If you can eliminate the threat before it happens, then do so. 3. If the enemy can't touch you, then they can't beat you. This means contact with fist or chakra. A genjutsu is far harder to evade than any kunai. 4. Anything available to a shinobi can be a weapon or tool. However, if a tool isn't used to protect what's precious to you, then it is dead weight. And 5. You haven't truly mastered a jutsu until you can do it silently, from every part of your body, without vocal commands or hand seals. Each of his guidelines had been a lesson learned from Ebisu-sensei. Over the last day, Naruto's entire view of him had changed. He had never had anyone teach him as much as that man had. And from the few hours they had spent together, Naruto felt as if he had gained more than even the whole year of life that he had lost. Taking a deep breath, Naruto took the famous youthful nice guy pose. It was time to finish with a closing statement. I am going to become Hokage. And I will protect all of the people precious to me. Believe it! With that said, he sat back down, signifying that he was finished. Hatake Kakashi was not a fool, no matter how many times he acted like one. And he was fully aware that there was something wrong here. Naruto, asleep when he arrived, should have been bored and impatient. That small oddity could have been explained by him not sleeping well because he was too excited. But what couldn't be explained was the outfitting. It was as close to an Umbu uniform as one could get without being put under suspicion for impersonating the Umbu. At the same time, while his body language and attitude hadn't changed, he seemed calmer. He was more intelligent than he was a week ago. Hell, he was more intelligent than he had been at the academy yesterday. The Jonin could see it. The boy knew things that he hadn't before. His rules and guidelines were a single step towards the suspicion that the Jonin felt festering in his gut. The Sandaime had rigged it. There was no other explanation. The ex-Umbu member had heard about the scroll theft, and that Naruto acquired a certain jutsu from it. Obviously, the Hokage had felt that the opportunity to force-feed the boy knowledge via clone feedback was too great to pass up. This apparently had to have been paid for by bribing him with a new outfit and tools. And that last nindo of his. It was as if the old man had been trying to mold him into Kakashi's own personal Obito chibi. How dare that old fool use his past like this? Sasuke was the next to speak, although he didn't get up for it. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like training and testing myself against strong opponents. I dislike being caught off guard or unprepared for something. My plans for the future are to test myself against as many stronger opponents as available, until I can kill a certain man, and then to revive the Uchiha clan. The Uchiha was rap soundly in medical and combat tapes. Not the standard civilian rap, or even the shinobi combat weave. Clearly the one who had done it had studied extensively on the human body to maximize the range of movement and durability of the weave. The Jonin was mildly surprised at the extent of the boy's wounds. Nothing too damaging was done, but the total amount of minor injuries spoke of rage and violence. He couldn't believe his ears when he was told all that had happened to the boy. An ambush with shadow clones could understandably result in Naruto's victory, but his few checkups on the boy over the last year or so had him certain that there had to have been an exaggeration about how ruthless it had been. Seeing the outfit and the slight, but drastic changes in Naruto, almost changed his mind. Sakura spoke next. The kunoichi clearly hated Naruto, and even more clearly had a crush on Sasuke. Mentioning how taking care of him had made her feel, and how caring for his children would be a rewarding life, subtlety must have come as hard to her as it did to the previously orange boy. But no point in wasting a minor opening, so the Jonin gave an offhand comment that maybe she could be the team's medic. Her eyes brightened up at that. With their introductions over, he said a few words about himself and offered to explain the test. Taking out the two bells, he told them the rules, explaining as he did that they were not genin yet. When the possible medic objected that one of them was injured, he merely replied that they may have to finish a mission injured, so there was little difference. It was a shame that the Uchiha was hurt as badly as he was, but that didn't mean he would change his test. And if they failed, they would go back to the academy, and he would eat their lunch in front of them. His eye narrowed when both boys subtly became amused. Sakura was the only one to react with the panic he had expected. So I'm guessing both of you boys ate breakfast. They looked at each other, and Naruto's grin was almost reflected on the Uchiha. Almost. Even after I said you'd throw it up. It was Sasuke's reply that came, just another thing the Jonin hadn't expected. Even if we vomit, it was early enough that the nourishment has been absorbed. Neglecting to feed your body out of the fear that you might vomit is like not sharpening your kunai because someone might cut you with it. At that, he even sent a small glare at the pinkette message received. I'm not taking stupid risks when it comes to my shinobi career. Each of them had straightened, they were all ready to fight. One last thing and he would start the timer. I am a Jonin, against me you will have very little chance of victory. So come at me with the intent to kill. Their eyes hardened, he shouted Gyo and two of them vanished. With a sigh, the Jonin looked at the remaining would-be genin, and raised his eyebrow. Sensei, do you mean it? Naruto was in a ready stance, but his head was down, his eyes just barely visible, were almost cold. At his lack of response, the genin spoke again. Do you really want me to attack with the intent to kill? Ah, that was it. The poor not even a genin obviously thought he had a chance of hurting a jonin. No surprise there, he had already beaten a chunin with relative ease. Naruto, it's okay. I'm far above Mizuki's level. I won't die. So hold nothing back. You mean it, no holding back, I can use any tool I have to kill you, and I won't be punished for it? That question wasn't as unexpected as anything else Kakashi saw today. There were only two possible reasons he would ask a question like that. Either he was asking for permission to use that chakra, or Mizuki had been punishing him if he ever got too good. Use only whatever you feel comfortable explaining to your teammates. But don't hold back out of fear of the consequences. Even if I am hurt, you won't be punished. There. That should help his resolve. It not only hid the first reason while letting him know that if he wanted to explain it to his teammates he could, but it also let him know there would be no punishment if he did use it. And it ensured he knew that victory wouldn't get him in trouble here. Kakashi was mildly amused when a small amount of killing intent flickered to life in Naruto. Don't underestimate me, sensei. The genin looked up at him with a snarling face. And the level of killing intent he was producing spiked. I'll kill you! The Jonin could actually feel the chakra flowing through Naruto. It was unreal. It certainly wasn't that chakra, but his own. How much had Naruto been holding back exactly? If this was what the boy was talking about, then it explained a lot. All those times he would escape pursuit, his many successful prank infiltrations, even the easy defeat of Mizuki. In a flash, Naruto's fist slammed into Kakashi's open palm. His speed was at least Chunin. And the power behind the fist. It almost felt like Guy. Sasuke remembered this feeling clearly. It was the same as when Naruto had said those same words to him. Terror. The complete and absolute certainty that he was going to die. If not for the knowledge that Naruto was on his side, the Uchiha might have fled. He remembered the words the Dobe had whispered in their spar. Sensei's test is going to be a trick of some sort. You need to look underneath under his words to what he's trying to get out of saying them, and under that to why he would want that result. But above all, we need to work together no matter what he says. The scroll is for Sakura. It was a clear hint that the Dobe knew what the test was. He had inside information. And the fact that he would pass it to him like that could only mean that they weren't simply waiting for a late teacher. The Jonin was watching them. So when he landed from the toss, he passed a message to his landing pad and deftly transferred the scroll as per instructions, foregoing the payback spar he had desired in lieu of keeping his true abilities his own until the test. When Naruto moved, his body seemed to vanish. He was fast. Whatever punishment he thought he would get for not holding back must have been there for a long time. There was no possible way to get that fast overnight. Sasuke didn't know what happened between the dobe and their taijutsu instructor, but it had to be directly relevant to his secret skill. Was Naruto getting punished unless he held back? Or had he accidentally killed their sensei? It didn't really matter anymore. His secret was out. Naruto's quick maneuvers of hand-to-hand had almost caught the Jonin several times. Whatever it was Naruto was doing had managed to push the Jonin from his crouching position. Then Naruto leapt back, and when he landed, he wasn't alone. What was that jutsu? Naruto had never been able to perform the clone jutsu, and yet their sensei was dodging these ones like they were solid. It almost looked like he had their sensei cornered when the Jonin struck out and killed all of the clones, with a single hit to each. When the smoke dispersed, there were no Narutos left. Where had the original gone? He was about to come out to try his own luck at the Jonin when the entire area was covered in kunai from above. The Jonin leapt away and all the kunai vanished like the clones had. Naruto landed back on the ground where his clones had been killed. His unbleached uniform, added to his speed and movements, perfectly granted the illusion that he was a real shinobi. There was a single moment of pause between them, then out of nowhere Naruto threw himself to the ground. Another 4 kunai flew right over him at their sensei. Sasuke shot a look at his other teammate. She had been the one to throw those, and she was on the move. The Jonin dodged the kunai, of course, but his leap out of the way put him in midair. With Naruto on the ground out of his line of fire, the airborne shinobi was an open target for the Uchiha. Taking the advantage, Sasuke leapt out, catching their sensei with a quick taijutsu combination, which the Jonin bizarrely used to launch himself back towards the ground. The moment his feet touched down, though, Naruto's feet hit him square in the gut, just before Naruto burst into smoke as a giant shuriken almost cut their sensei in half. The sacrificed log fell to the ground and cleanly split apart. Sakura was on the move again, and clones were everywhere making noise. Sasuke took the chance to silently slide back into the trees. When the clones found their sensei, he would join the fight immediately. This was so bizarre. She had been dreaming of being on a team with Sasuke for who knows how long, and it was never like this. Not that she hadn't considered that Kami would require a balance to be kept and put her least favorite person on the team with her most favorite. But even in the fantasies faulted by universal balance where Naruto was a member of the team, Sasuke had always been the one in charge. Except in those ones. Her inner self almost made the kunoichi blush. The ones where she was in charge were unrelated to this issue. She couldn't believe that Sasuke had told her to follow Naruto's lead. He has information we don't, keep the scroll hidden. That was what he said to her, while lying on top of her. It was wrong. First it was the beating the Baka gave her poor Uchiha yesterday, then he mocked him today. And now, Sasuke wanted them to let Naruto lead. It was madness. Insanity. It seems to be working too, her inner self admitted. When she opened the scroll that was placed in her hand when her crush pulled her up, she felt her heart and jaw drop at the same time. Well, it wasn't Sasuke's declaration of love, it wasn't even his handwriting. No, instead she held a sloppy, grungy map of the training ground. The poorly written key signified that the grounds were layered with hundreds of traps. Not 10 or 20, not even a single 100, but hundreds. No wonder Naruto had needed that nap. He had been up all night setting traps for their test. She kind of felt bad for kicking him as hard as she had. Well, she'd never doubt Sasuke's plans again. If he said to follow Naruto's lead, then follow him she would. It was as if the Baka was a different person entirely now. He was calmer, smarter, way smarter. He had a plan, and he was actually outfitted properly. His movements in the brawl between him and Sasuke-kun had been at a level beyond anything she had seen in person. And there was that. The kunoichi shuddered at the thought of that horrible feeling she'd gotten when he told Sensei not to underestimate him. But now his fight with their sensei was almost impossible. Sakura knew that movement like this was normal for shinobi, but not him. He couldn't move like that if his pants were on fire. Taking another glance at the map, Sakura found the first trap close to her and looked it over. It was eerily similar to something he had made to launch paint balloons at Ino and her friends in the academy that time Ino had made her cry. The traps were simple enough to figure out. There were launchers, which she could release on her own, and many others that she could cause to go off by hitting the trigger when her sensei got near. Others still would be released only if set off by the battle. She silently hoped that Sasuke-kun wouldn't get caught by one. Their fight had moved, so she moved with it. There were so many traps listed on her new map that it almost didn't matter where she went, she was never too far from one. And when Naruto hit the dirt, she knew he had given her the opening. Releasing the cat, she sent the 4 kunai at their sensei. And when he dodged, Sasuke appeared. His fast movements had sensei flying at the ground, right into the line of fire of another clone's drop kick. Moving to the next one, she hit the release as soon as she arrived. The giant shuriken was flung at their sensei, who used a substitution to escape. The next half an hour went like that. Naruto Baka would keep sensei team moving and leading him into traps, and she would set them off, forced to deal with the clones and her many projectiles. The Jonin left himself open, and that was when Sasuke would pounce. Naruto even got him into the lake where Sasuke showed his cool fire style and boiled the water, turning the replacement log into ashes. They were getting closer and closer to bringing him down. And there it was. An opening that was too good to be true. One of the bells had broken off his belt, and was still hanging at that same distance for half a second without inertia. The Jonin was using his chakra to dangle the bell out as bait. Not wanting Sasuke-kun to be caught, she moved as fast as she ever had, and instead of taking the bell and landing in his trap, she plunged her kunai under his rib. Both her teammates' attacks landed a second later. But the Jonin was gone. This was by far the best team he had ever tested. With Naruto sending a mass of clones at him wave after wave, he was kept busy while the other two would prepare their own attacks. The one time he had tried to swap with a clone and hide among them, the original would vanish and they would all be pelted by kunai from above. During his fight with the Umbresk Genin, Kakashi was constantly targeted by a relentless onslaught of projectiles. They would even take out Naruto's clones when the opening presented itself. Haruno wasn't anywhere near the disappointment he had observed from before. To think she had layered the place with traps beforehand was unusual, especially for this generation of female genin. Not only that, he couldn't seem to predict where she would strike out from. None of the information he had on her helped him to expect her most logical trap placement. She had actually used one trap to set off 6 others that were all in the treetops. It was as if she had a completely separate personality picking the locations of her traps. And every time he had to recover or would go off balance, Sasuke would strike. He had precision, and an arsenal of small fire jutsu that most genin wouldn't be able to use, and the large fireball he sent at him was well beyond any of the current batch of genin he had seen in the academy this year. The copy-nin was most surprised at the raw speed and strength Naruto had. It was so disproportionate to what he should have that it almost made up for his horrendous hand-to-hand skills. Those, oddly enough, posed their own problems. His style was so bizarre, and almost counterproductive, that it was hard to follow. And worse, was that it had points of absolute fluidity and precision littered throughout it at random. Kakashi couldn't predict anything with his movements. He was almost tempted to open Obito's eye until he heard the genin's arm dislocate for an especially nasty jab to his throat. The kid was taking damage to use this style. No wonder they told him to knock it off. Then Naruto used the shadow projectile jutsu. Kakashi had known about the scroll theft, and he was informed by the Hokage the boy hadn't learned any other jutsu. Naruto couldn't have figured it out on his own, could he? That was just absurd. Altogether, their teamwork was unexpected. They hadn't even tried to compete, working with one another from the very beginning. He had tried not to move any faster than a high genin speed, but at this point he had been forced to move at mid-chunin speed several times to avoid being hit by a stray fist or kunai, and the Uchiha had almost forced him into Jonin level speed with his quick turnaround attempt at the bells, flipping upside down and launching off of a clone at them. The copy-nin was almost willing to let them take the bells, just to see how they would resolve his little ruse. And so, he tried to arrange an opening, letting the bells go. But instead of his genin taking the bait, the Jonin had taken a blade and found himself bleeding from a vicious stab to his side, courtesy of the pinkette. Obviously she had thought the opening had been a trap, and prevented her teammates from getting caught in it. He still couldn't believe he, a Jonin, had been stabbed by the least of the 3 not even genin. Even as he held a hand to the bleeding cut, not too deep. She had barely punctured the skin before he'd moved. If her lunge hadn't been so unexpected, it never would have landed. How was he going to live this down? The timer should have gone off already, and seeing no real end to this constant assault, Kakashi decided to show them exactly what a Jonin was, and what it meant to fight a losing battle. Vanishing from their area, he waited until the bell finally went off. Once it had, he reappeared next to the originals of Sasuke and Naruto. At the same time, the genin wasn't the only one to use a shadow clone. With the words "my turn," his fist slammed into their guts, targeting stomachs specifically, immediately causing them to puke. After all, he did say they'd throw up breakfast. All of Naruto's current clones burst as a third Jonin Suiton Jutsu struck. Then at a low Jonin speed he and his clone began smacking the boys from every direction with a single open hand from each of the clones. At the same time, the third Kakashi targeted the trap user, and sent small fist-sized bullets of mud raining down on her. Every time Naruto tried to create clones they died instantly from the most painful nerve strikes he knew. When the Uchiha tried to curl his arms were dislocated. No matter where Sakura went, the mud kept pelting her, and when she tried diving underwater he electrified it. And almost immediately the three of them were bruised, bleeding, and unconscious. Kakashi looked down at them once they had been laying down on the grass and hosed off with a clean Suiton Jutsu. The first team to have ever passed his test. He could barely understand it. From what he'd learned about them yesterday, Naruto had attacked the Uchiha in an ambush, likely with his clones. Though he didn't have any real details, the boy was soundly beaten and the Uchiha should have been eager to fight against the blonde. Furthermore, Sakura had a passionate dislike for the boy while the clan survivor had the same feelings for the girl. It didn't add up. But then again it kind of did. If Naruto's attack had been as brutal as he had heard, then the Uchiha may have began respecting him. The girl could have taken his cues and followed Naruto's lead, accepting him as the alpha of the group, especially after that pressure of killing intent. And it was obvious that she had rebandaged Sasuke this morning. The Uchiha definitely hadn't seen the property of Haruno Sakura label placed on his lower back, by the girl's bandages. The tramp stamp was only visible to him, because they had been fighting. Altogether the Jonin had one hell of a team to start with. His body hurt. That was normal for what he'd just been through. However, he wasn't normal. Naruto knew that his pains should have already passed. Unless he hadn't slept as long as he had thought he would. Opening his eyes, Naruto could barely make out the form of their Jonin sensei standing over him. The beating he had given them had been completely uncalled for. Where the hell did it come from? Bastard sensei hadn't done this to them last time. Naruto was sure of that. So why? Why had the masked Jonin gone on the offensive? There was a groan from beside him as the Uchiha began to wake. His hand lifted from the ground and covered his eyes. What the hell? The Uchiha moaned. No one ever told you that I wouldn't fight back. Their sensei's voice was almost cheerful. Bastard. Had he enjoyed that? Well, since all three of you have woken up, congratulations. You managed to actually pass my real test without even trying. Blinking the pain from his eyes, Naruto looked around for Sakura. She was on Sasuke's other side. She had actually managed to sit up. Her hair was a tangled mop almost completely covering her head and shoulders. It was soaking wet. And so was she. When Naruto tried to sit up as well, he realized he was wet too. Well, that explained why he had woken up. Sensei must have dumped the whole river on them, if the soaking ground were anything to go by. What do you mean we passed? And why the hell did get kicked the shit out of us for? Naruto accused his sensei. The test was never really about the bells. Their sensei explained. It was about the mission to get them, and how you would perform it. If you had all attacked on your own, you never would have gotten close. And if you had fought each other. Letting that statement hang, the masked Cyclops gave each of them a pointed look. The only way a group of genin has any chance to win against a jonin is if they work together, and get very lucky. However, even that was a test. You were given a mission that would normally have caused you to fight against one another, and in order to see the true test you needed to be able to look underneath the underneath. That was something I thought you would have had trouble figuring out without it being explained, but even a jonin can misread someone. Naruto tried to ignore the look Sasuke was giving him. You are all officially genin. Meet back here tomorrow at noon for our first mission. I would suggest spending your free mornings training here together, and your afternoons working on individual training in one of the other public training grounds. Pulling out his book, their sensei turned on heel and began walking away. His suggestions echoed in Naruto's ears. Last time he had told them to be there at 8 in the morning, and then never shown up until noon. Why did he give them a different schedule this time? Why were so many things so different? First he showed up at the academy 2 hours early, then they had introductions here instead of on the academy roof, and he actually fought during the test now this. If things like that could change, then what else might be different? What else might be changed from what little he could remember of his past life? Naruto the Uchiha had turned to look directly at him. How did you know about the test? And things just kept changing. Sasuke had just called him by his name. After talking his way out of the Uchiha's curiosity, Naruto fled to the training ground behind their own. The circle of pillars. Training ground 17 held all sorts of landscapes and terrain. From the trees in the back to the cliffs on the wall. the river and beach that flowed behind the stone column, the circle of pavement that went around it, separated from the column by a deep trench, the grassy plain in front and the 10 training posts where Naruto meditated. All of it was encircled by the hundreds of towering posts that gave the training ground its name. This was where he had agreed to meet his supplemental sensei tomorrow. But that didn't mean he couldn't train here without him, did it? Taking his seat on the widest training post, Naruto began meditating. He had lost many clones during the test, and he had yet to release the rest of them still out there. Slowly he allowed the chakra of his copies to re-enter him and absorbed with the chakra all the thoughts and feelings that the clones had experienced. He wasn't anywhere near good at reading the feedback, but he was able to get more than he had the first few times he'd done it. A couple clones had been all that was left by the time he finished meditating, and those were the ones he'd assigned to stick around until the training ground was clear so he could reclaim his gear used in the test. His traps had all been clone tools, but in order to use the shadow projectile as often as he had lost the real tool each time. It wouldn't be very long before the other two finally went home or wherever they were going. Until then, Naruto would go over the forms and kata he had learned for his taijutsu. The test had gone great. He had made his impression and earned their respect in a matter of mere hours. As he moved from one stance to the next, the blonde considered his previous concern. Things were changing. As he had meditated a few moments ago, he had gained a clear view of his previous version of the bell test. His sensei had tied him to the training post for trying to eat the lunch boxes. It was a foolish thing to do, and he had been punished for it. And that was when Sasuke and Sakura passed the test, allowing them to become genin. His memories of a certain technique that their sensei used on him brought out a whole new disrespect for the man. However, unlike then, this time they had all fought together, and his sensei had beaten the living hell out of them for it. What happened to change it? The time-displaced teen spent his entire training session trying to figure it out. When the answer finally came to him, he almost had a panic attack. The only things different were things that had been affected by what he did. The thing changing everything was him. It started with his bet. Ebisu-sensei had been forced to train him, and that was how he got so much better than he was last time around. Next it was his fight with Sasuke before team placement. That must have been what caused Kakashi to change his test. Sasuke hadn't been there, so they hadn't introduced themselves. Sakura had been the one to fix him up, if the fact that her name was stamped on the bandage on his lower back said anything. Something she had done had gotten Sasuke to open up during the introductions this morning. And everything else had been him trying to make sure they passed. His traps, his warnings to Sasuke. They had been what got the three of them working together from the beginning, and that was why they had passed the way they did. Sensei had only fought back because Sakura had cut him a little. Her surprise attack had surprised all three of them. And the fact that the very tip of her kunai had tasted blood was something Naruto had never thought would ever happen for the girl. Every single thing that he did changed things. And everything could be changed if he didn't try to keep it the way it was. How could he be sure they would get the same missions or even the exam? Naruto was certain nothing he did could stop the exam from happening in the first place. But how could he be sure they were in it? He needed to find a way to make sure things happened as they were supposed to. And then, when he had the chance, he would stop Sasuke from leaving before he made it out of the village gates. Uchiha Sasuke wasn't fooled by a single one of the excuses Naruto had made. Saying things like that's just common knowledge and everybody knows genin teams are 3 genin to 1 jonin didn't explain anything. It was all bullshit. Sasuke had seen several genin squads with only 2 members, and he had witnessed firsthand as several of his clansmen were taken as apprentices. Naruto knew something before the test. There was no doubt in his mind that the blonde had been the one to set up all those traps Sakura was using. It wouldn't surprise him if the boy had somehow been behind her little ambush of their sensei too. Still, Sakura was the only one to have gotten the drop on their sensei. She had actually drawn blood. Even if it was only a tiny splat on the point of her kunai, the blood was still blood of a jonin. When he and Sakura had tried to look closer at the traps, they all vanished in a cloud of chakra. The scroll with the map disappeared with them. All that was left were a few kunai and shuriken that Naruto had used in the actual battle with their sensei. A pair of clones quickly swept all of those up. Solid clones. When did Naruto learn to make those? After the beating he had taken, the Uchiha had began looking over every memory he had of the dobe. He had thought the dobe had just been holding back a little, but now. His speed and technique from the bell test were leagues above what the proud genin could manage. The taijutsu style he was using was so unfamiliar to the Uchiha. Even their sensei had been taken by surprise. And the sheer amount of these solid clones he had used. If Sakura's understanding of the concept of substantial chakra constructs was right, then Naruto had at least 100 times the amount of chakra Sasuke had. Talking it over with the kunoichi brought the two of them to a single conclusion. Naruto was not a genin. He couldn't be. There was no way the Naruto they had known could have been hiding his abilities so well otherwise. If he had simply been hiding without any true training, then he would have slipped up. It was a bizarre conclusion, but they were convinced. He was a spy for the Hokage who had been placed on the team. Once Sakura had confirmed where Naruto lived, they had no doubts. No child his age would be allowed to live alone in the red light district. At first Sakura thought that he had been replaced entirely. Like maybe he had been dropped from the program, and someone else took his place. But Sasuke was certain that wasn't the case, or his disguise would have been disrupted when their sensei had attacked. The pinkette admitted she knew he was the same person too, because she could feel the same body size and shape when she kicked him. If he had been in a henge, it would have felt different. It actually made more sense if he had been a plant even back in the academy anyway. Naruto had always been pulling things in class and always got bad grades even when he did the work. It took a little arguing, but they soon agreed that the adults did treat him differently than the rest of the students. All of the hush whispers as he walked by their parents, the glares always sent his way. They had assumed his treatment was because of his behavior. The only one who seemed to like him had been Irika, and he was the boys' main target most of the time. The conclusion. Naruto, a shinobi who lived in the red light district and was good buddies with their sensei outside of class, who had the ability to completely hide his true skills, which were on par with at least Mizuki-sensei, had more chakra than anybody they had heard of, except maybe the Hokage, and routinely evaded the Umbu, was being treated like his very presence was an insult to the other instructors. The only explanation that fit was that he was a secret agent placed there by the Hokage because of the number of clan-born students in that class. And the other sensei didn't like a full shinobi infiltrating their class. He never did his work because he was always bored from having done it already. Finally, once they had graduated, Naruto had been put on their team to protect the Sharingan. Sasuke knew that since that night, he had been placed under guard by the Umbu when he was alone. And since Naruto had been there with them even before then, it meant he wasn't there simply to keep the Sharingan safe. That must have been a new mission. It also explained how he had been made a genin anyway. They had probably expected him to be finished when his mission at the academy was over, and that was why he failed. He would have been able to simply drop the act and return from his mission. As skeptical as the two of them were about that final conclusion, the alternative was that Naruto, the goof, had been flawlessly hiding at least Chunin-level abilities that surely would have passed him from the academy a long time ago. And that he had been getting punished when he displayed them as part of a village-wide scheme to keep him down for something that he or his family did sometime in the past that nobody was allowed to talk about. Shinobi infiltration, or village-wide secret conspiracy against a super genius, moron as a person. Easy answer in a shinobi village where they all trained to be shinobi. Morning arrived with Naruto making his lap around the circle of pillars. He wasn't sure why, but last night had been a very strange sleep. It felt like he had been told some huge joke and he couldn't remember it. Whatever it was, his mood had been affected greatly by it. Everything seemed to make him laugh today. It slipped his mind that his shadow clones had only returned with his missing tools after he'd fallen asleep. But the tools were all there in the morning, so he repacked them and dressed in his new orange. Today Kakashi would likely take them for their first D rank. But if not, it meant Naruto's slim grasp on the few changes he had made was worse than he thought. Try as he might, Naruto couldn't remember what his first D rank mission was. All he remembered about it was that Irika had yelled at him in front of the old man for complaining about it. That wasn't the only time Irika had yelled at him for it either. Naruto had one more hint at what the big mission was. He had been begging for a new mission and Irika had been there then too, which meant that it was going to be during a break in the academy. Classes started up again in a week, and they would go on for 3 months before the next break. That must be when it would happen. During the spring break. Naruto had until then to figure out how to ensure they were on that mission. Otherwise there was a chance that their sensei wouldn't let them take the Chunin exam. And that meant that whatever happened in the end would happen differently. He wouldn't get the chance to save the old man. Naruto wasn't sure how he knew the man would die, but he had been so sure the old man had been dead when he first returned. He wasn't going to miss the chance to save him. His musings finally came to an end as he sensed movement just outside the training ground. It was Ebisu-sensei. Ah, Naruto. You've already taken a lap this morning? The Jonin quickly jogged over to the 10 posts. Yes, sensei. I was going through my kata before grabbing something for breakfast. Straightening his glasses, the bandana-browed shinobi considered. How long until you are to meet with your team? Noon. The look Naruto received from Ebisu told him that the Jonin hadn't expected it any more than he had. In that case, I'll treat you. I know a good place to get Tamagoyaki and Yakizakana this early in the day. I guarantee they'll serve you with the utmost respect. Naruto certainly wasn't going to waste this chance. Not only was his sensei going to treat him, but it was at a place he'd never gotten to eat before. Ebisu led him across the village to the market district. As they walked, Naruto explained how their bell test had gone. Ebisu had been surprised it had gone so well. Thankfully, he had thought of excuses for Sasuke, so he had his newer revised ones to tell his sensei. The man chuckled when Naruto told him about Sakura's tramp stamp of legal possession. And he gaped at the fact that she, out of the three of them, had managed to bleed the Jonin. Arriving at the restaurant, they took seats at a table near the far corner, in a private booth. Naruto had to do a double take when he saw the waitress quickly, but not appearing rushed, heading in their direction. She draped herself over the Jonin. Her pink kimono spread as one of her legs wrapped around his waist. One of her hands seductively caressing his jawline. "So honey, please tell me you haven't forgotten our arrangement." "I have not, Mitarashi-chan." Nature was certain that the closet perv was getting close to passing out as he turned red from her touch. "Oh, so formal. If you talk like that, then people might not get the wrong idea about our relationship." Naruto knew her from somewhere. He was also certain this was not where she belonged. "Hey, I thought you were a shinobi. What are you doing working here?" At the genin's question, the familiar woman turned away from her victim and gave a wide feral grin. "I'm serving tea to some very important customers," she exclaimed. As she did so, she also squeezed his sensei's arm into her generous bust. The blushing adult had explained several instances like this over his education. It was simple security to have a shinobi of their village prepare and serve accommodations for any high-risk visitors. But who could have come to the village at this point in time? The Chunin exams were several months away. The blonde voiced his question. She gave him a sultry look as she answered. "Why, Naruto-kun, don't you know that when providing services her face came very close to his as she spoke into his ear? Every customer is important." Ebisu-sensei cleared his throat. Before Naruto knew she had even moved, the seductress had draped herself back over the Jonin, and was whispering in his ear. His reaction, however, was a sudden reduction of blush as his face became stern. "Well, I did promise Naruto-kun breakfast." The man sighed. Giggling, Mitarashi, however, bounced off of him. The result drew the man's eyes straight to her chest behind his sunglasses. From the angle his head was turned, Naruto had a bare glimpse of his eyes from the side. "Pervert. I'll bring you both plenty to eat. And then maybe I can serve you dessert later tonight. Just the two of us." As they waited for their food, Ebisu pulled out a small square of paper. "Let us begin our work on item number 5. Your advanced elemental training." Handing Naruto the paper, he instructed the genin on how to use it, resulting in a split cutting all the way through the square. You are a wind user. Fortunately for you, that element can be added to many different skills even without jutsu, such as using it to extend the reach of your blade, or kunai, and even boosting the speed of your thrown weapons." He was simply restating it. Naruto remembered from many different points of view the lectures on how chakra could enhance shinobi tools. Wind and lightning were the two most kenjutsu-type elements. Fire could be used to make the blade burn, but fire didn't really cut. While water was a good supplement to kenjutsu, it wasn't a direct enhancer. And without certain bloodlines, earth was a purely defensive element when it came to kenjutsu. Unfortunately, the Jonin continued, "There are very few wind users available to instruct or even assist my instruction. I know of several Anbu who use it, however they cannot be spared. There are only 4 others in the village who might be able to assist." Ebisu adjusted his glasses as he began his list. "The first option is your sensei. Through his digitsu he has acquired many wind jutsu. In using them he may have gained some understanding of them." Naruto's thoughts on that probably showed on his face, because the lecturing hastened past the copycat. "The next is the Hokage himself. His element is not wind, however he is quite capable of using it. He is busy, but I can ask for pointers to give you from him, or he might even be able to get some from an Anbu for us." That was an idea! How awesome would it be to get training from the Hokage himself? His son, however, is a wind type like you, but he currently has his own team to train. The last is an elder of the village who was an extremely skilled wind user. It would be best not to consider him for this though. His time is spent elsewhere. They continued to discuss the issues of training in that element until their food was served. Ebisu-sensei would request the pointers from the Hokage, but he could at the very least get him started on the leaf-splitting palm. Senjutsu was the wind type of the first 5 forms. The instructor had just began explaining the primary scale of steps that could be taken using solely the splitting leaf palm when she returned. As she served them, She bowed low enough that both males could see she had loosened the sash holding her kimono closed. Ebisu's hand immediately gripped his nose to prevent the coming bleed. With a wink at the pervert, the kunoichi stood, turned and walked away. Ebisu's eyes were glued to her retreating form until she vanished around a divider. Shaking himself out of his trance, the jonin ushered him to eat. The food was amazing. Grilled fish and an omelet with toppings and sides to spare. Naruto had eaten food like this before, but for some reason eating it this time gave him the same feeling of being extra awake as eating at Ichiraku's. As they ate, Ebisu asked about his plans for team training. I don't know. I guess I was just going to wait until Sensei told us his plans. He wasn't sure if Kakashi would even be having them train together. He had told them to train on their own in the mornings, which was different than before. It was entirely possible that the fact they had impressed him was what he had been waiting on last time around. The jonin nodded his head vigorously, his bandana swishing as it moved. Yes, that is a sensible intention. However, one must at least have an idea of their goals. What thoughts have you considered about your team training? Well, I was kinda thinking I'd just keep training with you or by myself when on my own, and do whatever team training that sensei gave us. The blonde ducked his face into his food when Ebisu gave him a disappointed look. Naruto, you are part of a team now. That means you need to think about more than just making yourself stronger. Increasing their strength will only increase yours in the end. As a small flush of shame entered his face, Naruto told him his thoughts on the jonin, telling them to work individually in the mornings, suggesting that he already had things planned for after the mission. Ebisu sighed. As long as that was their plan, the jonin advised him, after Naruto did his lap and kata they would be able to meet every morning to train. They could even eat out like they were this time if Naruto was doing well. Naruto was about finished with his food as Ebisu pressed the issue of team training. He was adamant that since Naruto could water walk and they couldn't, his first course of action should be teaching his teammates to do so as well. Naruto didn't want to lose his advantage against Sasuke, and even more so, he didn't want to change things any further. But it wasn't like he could tell Ebisu about why. So he settled for arguing that he shouldn't have to give up his hard work to someone who would just copy everything. But the jonin chuckled and replied, sharing your training with your teammates is the correct thing to do. It would be abandoning them to do otherwise. Still though, if you do share your training, you don't have to do it for free. Wait. You mean I could make them pay me for the training? Naruto was sure that it wouldn't work. Sakura would think he was trying to get a date, and Sasuke wouldn't be able to accept it without hurting his pride. No. Certainly not. The man quickly rejected Naruto's inquiry. What you can do, however, is to trade the training for jutsu. Do remember that the requirement of our bet only includes teaching you the advanced elemental conversion. While it is possible to use wind in an excess of ways without actual jutsu, the Uchiha is certain to have the wind jutsu he could trade. Sasuke would never go for that. He's too proud to give up anything in exchange for getting taught by the dobe. It sounded like a great idea. Naruto could actually get behind it. But how could he ever get the others to agree to it? Once more his sensei proved to him exactly how little he really knew. That's not a problem at all. Just inform him that an added benefit of the training is that if he manages to learn it, his chakra control should be well past the level at which he would be able to activate his Sharingan. Most Uchiha are able to do so after the tree walking training. I'm sure that if you bait the deal with that, then he'll agree without hesitation. That would definitely work. But Naruto still didn't want to lose his advantage against the Uchiha or change things any worse. But as he no longer had a reasonable argument, the genin resolved to simply drop the subject. When they met at the training ground for their first mission as a team, Naruto's return to the color orange was as surprising to his team as his first outfit change had been. It seemed they had thought he would be permanently garbed in his Umbu-esque uniform. He explained to them that the Umbu uniform was his formal outfit, and he didn't believe this mission would require it. Both Sasuke and Sakura shared a look. At the same time, Kakashi's visible eye narrowed into a squint. There was little talk as they made their way to the mission office. Just as Naruto remembered, Irika-sensei was there. He hadn't paid any attention to the others during the last time that they had learned they would only be doing chores. This time, he watched as their expectant expressions quickly morphed from surprise to defeated groans. His reaction was a little less than the adults had been expecting. He didn't argue or groan like his teammates, and so, instead of getting yelled at the way he had before, both of his sensei were staring at him as if he'd loudly passed gas. Again, his teammates looked at each other. He wasn't sure why, but that look made him feel as if he was missing some kind of big joke and felt a ghost of laughter rising in his chest. Their first mission was painting a fence. So while their sensei took the scroll, they followed him to the address listed. As they worked, Sasuke and Sakura began whispering out of earshot. Naruto considered creating clones to help, but decided against it. If he did create a clone, the construct would be just as distracted as he was. His dilemma over whether or not to teach Sasuke to water walk was beginning to eat away at him. Sure, he could teach Sakura, if she'd let him. But then, she would turn around and show Sasuke. And while that might help her to bond with him, Naruto still couldn't think of a way to get her to agree to it. It took the whole mission, but he eventually decided that this time, Sasuke would stay in the village. He could change things, right? If he changed things, they wouldn't be what he remembered. But he didn't want Sasuke to be the guy he remembered. So why not? Already his act of revenge had changed the boy's attitude towards him. So why not stop Sasuke from leaving in the first place, instead of trying to make sure he could bring the boy back this time? If he really was the one changing things, then that meant all he had to do was make sure he only changed certain things. Things like what he did around his teammates and friends. Those couldn't have too much effect on the big stuff. And as long as they went on the same big missions and took the Chunin exam, things should stay roughly the same, right? He could only remember one mission that could change anything before the exam, and that was the foggy mission where he had gained 2 of his rules. Anything else should be fine to change. This meant that Naruto could do everything he could to stop the Uchiha from leaving. The best way to stop him was to make Sasuke want to stay. To do that, the blonde needed to rebuild his bonds with Sasuke and make them even stronger than the last time. Which meant he had to forget his anger at the boy for what his other self had done. He needed to stop thinking of him as the guy who abandoned them, who killed him in the Valley of the Ends. Naruto needed to forgive and forget that Sasuke. This new Sasuke couldn't be Sasuke team. He was a different person. He would become a different Sasuke. Naruto had come to his decision. In order for this Sasuke to become different, he had to treat him different. His actions were what changed things, so if he changed the way he acted towards Sasuke, then it should change what the boy felt. To that end, his rival and one-time friend was no longer Sasuke team. Just as Sakura was no longer his Sakura-chan. From that point on, Naruto would fully support Sakura's efforts to gain Sasuke's love. This Sasuke was not the team, instead he would be Uchiha Haim. Sasuke flinched and glared at him for announcing the boy's new nickname. "What do you want, Naruto?" the newly titled princess demanded. "You think we could get this knocked out a little faster already? Let's pick up the pace, 'cause we're already almost finished, and I want to see what kind of training Sensei will have for us when we're done." Both of his teammates lit up at his suggestion, and they had the rest of the fence painted only a few minutes later. The masked Jonin led the way back to the mission's office with the signed mission report. His pace seemed to have increased the same way theirs had while painting. The Hokage had already left, and Irika-sensei was the one handing out the day's payments. After turning in their mission, instead of getting a new mission or being dismissed, Kakashi told them they had 5 minutes to get to the training ground or they wouldn't get to sleep tonight. After he had made good on his words about throwing their breakfast up, all 3 of them bolted out of the office. Their arrival at the training ground was punctuated by a ringing timer. Naruto had ended up dragging Sakura along by her arm when she began to fall behind. Of course, because she couldn't keep up, he hadn't been able to run at his full speed. He would have just picked her up, but he was certain she would have hit him for trying to carry her. As it was, they had only just made it. Their sensei was already there sitting on the memorial stone and reading. As the timer rang, he slipped his book in his vest and addressed them. "Okay boys, you 2 are going to spar while Sakura is going to fix her endurance problem," he announced. Then looking at the kunoichi, he continued, "Sakura, you're going to tag the monument, and then run back to the office and tag my clone. We will both be counting, so you should get started. You have until nightfall to make 100 laps." With a gasp of despair, Sakura deflated and ran over to the hero's stone. Then she began her way back to the mission's office. As Kakashi thought, Naruto was holding back again. The genin wasn't moving anything like he had been in the bell test. It was as if he wasn't even channeling his chakra at all. The genin was sparing solely with his body's own speed. "Naruto, why are you holding back?" Without missing a movement, the boy responded, "So Sasuke can keep up." The Uchiha balked at that, but then his eyes flared and he pressed harder, forcing Naruto to dodge and weave away before continuing. "He won't get stronger if he doesn't at least stand a chance of beating me. At this speed he has to work for it, but it's still possible. And that means that he will work for it, as hard as he can if necessary." Kakashi hadn't expected that answer. It was too matured, and more the Jonin had thought that Naruto would be wanting to show off. But instead the boy was focused on helping Sasuke improve. They continued to spar like that until Sakura had finished her laps. their wordless clashes becoming less and less even as time wore on. Naruto appeared to still be fresh after their hours of contact. By the time the Pinkette returned from her final lap, Sasuke had become thoroughly exhausted. The moment Sakura tagged the monument the last time, Kakashi announced that he expected all three of them here the next day at noon. Then he vanished in a swirl of leaves. Picking himself off the ground, Sasuke gathered his things and began trudging towards the Uchiha district. Uchiha-hime! Naruto called out before Sasuke had gotten too far. Hey, you should ask Sakura if she wants to eat dinner with us. Sasuke had been slightly stunned by the continued use of his new nickname, and the fact that Naruto had basically implied that they were going regardless and mindlessly complied. Sakura's mouth hung open as she began to blush. Hastily agreeing, she rushed to catch up with them. After eating at the last place with Ebisu-sensei had gone so well, Naruto decided to let the other two pick their dining. Which meant that when Sakura saw Ino, they had no choice but to go to the yakiniku shop where Team 10 was dining. Naruto had been intending to start bargaining with them over the training during the meal. However, since they were dining with Team 10, the male blonde tried his best to simply be the happy kid he had been when he first graduated last time around. Sasuke naturally sat in an open seat, causing Sakura and Ino to get into their usual argument about who would sit next to him. With a raised eyebrow, Shikamaru stated that Sakura's name was already on him. He left his statement hanging when Ino glared vengeance at him. Sorry ladies, but Uchiha-hime requires a proper dining environment, as such me and Choji will be sitting beside him. The tubby boy looked at him in shock, when Naruto simply picked up Sasuke's chair, interrupting the boy's search for the written name as he had to hold on to keep from falling off, and moved it to the other side of the table, taking the seat on the other side of it from the larger boy. As soon as Ino heard the name he had called Sasuke, she grinned. Huh? Well, that explains some things. Naruto didn't know what she meant, but a tremendous sense of overwhelming doom settled on his shoulders. As they ate, she told them about how her dad was busy making house calls for some sort of food poisoning epidemic. From what she had eavesdropped, there was a single person involved with all of the shops affected, and she thought they were trying to find out who had been the one to poison them all. Shikamaru told them about their sensei and what all they did for their test, and then Naruto and Sakura regaled them with stories of their own bell test. That night was restless. Naruto had eaten too much trying to keep up with Choji. Ino's random comments still made Naruto feel like he'd done something horribly wrong. And he still hadn't been able to start changing Sasuke yet either. Although he was certain that the boys' stuck-up attitude had been a little better while they ate. The Uchiha had actually told Shikamaru about their sensei, and agreed to play a game of shogi later that week. Through most of the night, Naruto spent his time awake going over everything he could think of to help change his friend. He even rehearsed his plot to trade Sasuke's jutsu for water walking and how it would help him unlock his Dijitsu. The genin tried to remember the last time Sasuke had unlocked his eyes, but instead all he could remember was the Uchiha dying and the color red and anger. Rage. Well, he knew that hadn't been the way it went, or Sasuke team wouldn't have been able to kill him. So for now it did nothing to help Uchiha-hime unlocking his eyes. There was something else, he wasn't sure what it was though. It had something to do with the mask, and the mirrors, and maybe a girl? Thinking about that mission made his chest hurt, but he didn't understand. Who was that girl? Why was she so important? He had flipped through his bingo book, but outside of a few pictures he thought he recognized, only Sasuke's brother stood out in his memories. He was certain that the fish dude that was with the clan killer was Hoshigaki Kisame. But Naruto had no idea where he had even seen the two of them together. He could remember something about boobs and a toad and the perverted shinobi. But that had nothing to do with the mission that he was trying to remember right now. That mission, with the words of his past, and the deep-seated feeling that he had made a mistake, carried him off into a fitful sleep. The next morning Naruto finished his laps and did his kata with a weary slump. Once done, he left a clone at the training ground to let Ebisu know where he was going. He was going to talk to Sasuke about the training, and once he had taught it to Sasuke, the Uchiha could teach it to Sakura. The clone would explain his ideas to the man and get whatever instructions he had for Naruto to do for the day. Then the clone would come to Naruto and tell him about them directly to ensure nothing was lost in the feedback. It only took a few minutes to find Sasuke. He was already up and training in the Uchiha training fields. His body no longer wrapped in the bandages that he had worn the previous 2 days. Making a clone to tell his other clone where to find them, Naruto announced his presence. Yo! Uchiha-hime, I got some training plans I want to talk to you about. The Uchiha immediately stopped his agility motions and trotted over to the edge of the field to glare at Naruto. Did you know about the tag? The Uchiha's borderline accusation was laced with venom. It wasn't really safe for my health to say anything, Naruto grinned sheepishly, and rubbed the back of his head. He was ready to bolt if Sasuke retaliated. We both know Sakura has been looking for a reason to hit me, and I didn't really want to give her any now that we're genin. The taller boy almost flinched. Not fully, but more than just a blink. His downcast expression lost the heat of wrath from only a second ago. What kind of training did you have in mind? So the Uchiha had been changing already. He hadn't said anything about Naruto being the dobe or even sneered at him. Sasuke had simply asked what he had in mind. Well, I know a pretty cool chakra control exercise that I can show you. I'm told that most Uchiha unlock their Sharingan during this training, and since you haven't yet, I was thinking you might be willing to trade for it. At the mention of his clan's dojutsu, Sasuke's eyes narrowed. What would you know about the Sharingan? Other than that you, sensei, and your brother are the last who have it? The basics. Sasuke was clearly surprised about something he had said. Naruto thought he heard him mumble the word sensei, but that didn't make any sense. The dojutsu of the Uchiha clan, he continued. It is capable of providing the user with a time-dilated point of view, allowing faster reaction speed, a higher level of detail-orientated perception, and it also, much like the Byakugan, gives the user the ability to actually see chakra and chakra networks, thus granting the autonomous copying of any motion or jutsu performed by those being observed. It is primarily a reaction-based tool, however it is also an effective genjutsu instrument, and can easily cast or break most genjutsu with little skill or effort required from the user. By the time he had completed his textbook description of the Sharingan as Ebisu-sensei had explained it, the Uchiha's jaw had dropped just like Sakura's had been doing lately. Snapping his fingers to get the boy's attention, the blonde grinned widely. It looked like he had convinced his teammate already. I can give you the training that I offered, or you can wait until sensei gets around to it, but if you want to go on higher ranked missions sooner, then we can't just sit back and wait for them. If you agree to trade training, I will expect you to share this training with Sakura. She probably wouldn't want to do anything I suggest, but I'm willing to bet she could get the training down faster than you do. How much? The Uchiha cut right to the point. Any winjutsu you have. Not the training. Sasuke shook his head with a small smile. How much are you willing to bet that she can finish this training faster than me? Oh. A matter of his pride. It was unintended but perfect. Well, how about if she does? You have to ask her on a date, and you have to tell her that she'll get the date if she does before you start teaching it to her. And if I lose, I'll let you copy some of my jutsu. That was perfect. Not only did he help Sakura out, but now Sasuke was more motivated than ever. Deal. The Uchiha agreed without hesitation, obviously thinking about getting his hands on the shadow clone. What is this training? Anna. Not yet, Heim. First, Naruto wagged his finger at him. My price. I'm a wind type, and there are no wind users available to teach me any jutsu of that element. I'm sure your clan has at least a few wind type jutsu written down, right? Well, if I teach you, then I need a wind jutsu or two in exchange. Sasuke thought about it. His face expressed a deep conflict. Then he brightened. Do I get to copy any jutsu I give you when you finish them? Only once sensei says that I'm doing them effectively. With my levels of chakra I tend to waste a lot, and we don't want you copying me if I'm too sloppy. That was the main reason he had asked Ebisu for the 4 jutsu he had. Because his past encounter with the man had explained how he wasted too much chakra. The Uchiha agreed once more. They had a bargain. The deal was set. And what a deal it was! Whatever rank the fake really was had become irrelevant the moment Sasuke was convinced that Naruto could help him unlock his Sharingan. Note to self, the Uchiha thought, find out what the fake was talking about when he said our sensei had the Sharingan. If the orange-colored genin was right about the training, the Sasuke would have gladly paid any of his jutsu for it. Once he unlocked his dijutsu, he could simply duplicate any of the jutsu he saw. Besides that, because Naruto had agreed to let him copy the jutsu he gave him, he would even be getting extra training and using his dijutsu afterwards. What was a few wind jutsu compared to that? When he agreed to the final deal, he was told he had to pay up front so that Naruto could be training on the jutsu while he trained. So the Uchiha rushed into the Uchiha compound. He made his way towards the collection of jutsu he had gathered from the empty houses. The Uchiha had a jutsu library. However, with them gone, it had been transcribed by the bank with all the other major valuables of the clan. He had access to it whenever he wanted. But it couldn't just be left in the empty compound. Still, he had found many hastily written jutsu scrolls and notes throughout the compound as he took inventory. The entire compound had been inventoried within the year. The majority of the houses had been emptied of anything that wasn't decor and furnishings. All the tools, cloths, foods, toys, papers, and anything else they had found had been sifted through. Cash and valuables went to the bank with the library. All food items were donated away. He had needed to make choices on almost all of the rest of the items found. Most he had simply put off, by sending them to the bank vault. He had all the clothing found sorted and placed in storage. Several items had simply been donated, but the majority of them bore the clan symbol. He had given most of the toys to the local orphanage, along with any of the children's clothes that didn't have the clan emblem on them. As repayment for that kindness, the Hokage had waived all fees for the upkeep of the clan until he became a shinobi the other day. He had all tools stored in a single location. Basically, the military police armory had been boosted by any other tool that could be useful. The documents, however, had been sorted out before being given to him for allocation. Many had been from the military police, which were confiscated as village security files. Others had been sent to the bank as valuable assets and financials. The rest had been given to him for sorting. There were journals and letters and autobiographies. There were even a few half-written novels. He had thrown out all the attempts to recreate the Ika Ika series without even looking at them. Mostly, though, he had sorted out the jutsu kept by individuals. Most of the jutsu he had found had been added to the library, but if the jutsu was already there, then he added it to his collection. His sorting of these had been just as meticulous as the sorting of the library had been. He easily found 3 wind jutsu that would work. He had more than a few in the library, but only 7 in his collection. Picking the lowest rank of each type of wind jutsu, impact, blast, and cutting, he headed back out to where Naruto was speaking with his clone, who vanished in a cloud of chakra before the Uchiha got in hearing range of their conversation. After explaining the various steps of the chakra walking training methods to the shadow clone, Ebisu decided to spend the day with his original charge. Not all shinobi could just power through the training. The correct method of learning was a series of broken down steps, from geta walking, in which one wears a pair of strapless clogs, to water walking was a vast number of steps. And it all began with picking up a leaf on the back of one's hand. Once he wrote all the step on a scroll, he gave it to the clone to deliver to the original, and told the clone that he expected the original to master all of the steps as well. Each step helped to refine the process, and could very well increase his control proportionally. Charging out behind the clone, Ebisu headed off the Hokage's night nurse, who would be dropping Konohamaru off at Geminus. Today, Ebisu would see how quickly Konohamaru could pass each of the steps. He began by having the boy float a leaf on his forehead for 10 minutes. Unlike all the times he had told the boy to do it before, Konohamaru didn't complain once. Then he asked the child to try picking one up with the back of his hand. It took about 20 minutes before he could pick it up and hold it. So he moved on to the same task with the foot. As the Jonin watched Konohamaru's improvement, he couldn't help but acknowledge the effect Naruto had on the boy. Nothing he had ever said to the child had gotten this much effort out of him. By the time they broke for lunch, Konohamaru was able to walk with the geta on his feet. After that, they would begin walking up increasing inclines until it was time to move to the stone wall, the last step before tree walking. Naturally, Konohamaru wouldn't be able to get that far as quickly as he had come this far. It required much more chakra capacity than the child had. But it was a great progress. The last 3 days, the Jonin had gotten the vessel caught up in most of the academy lessons. There was very little left for them to cover that applied to practical use. The rest of it was simply history and politics. They would cover maps more as they continued, but yesterday's work on geography had been quite successful. It was time for him to work on the bet. He had already started Naruto on item 3, the taijutsu. He had taught the boy every basic kata for all the styles he knew. He focused heavily on defense. But that would always be a work in progress. With the Uchiha on his team, Naruto had only 6 months to get most of it down, but that would have to be enough. Item 5, the wind element, would also take time. It was likely that even with the shadow clone jutsu, they wouldn't finish it before the exams. In working on it, he could also help Naruto with the wind jutsu he received from the Uchiha. He would locate the other 4 jutsu and teach them to the boy once he had finished learning at least one of those. Once the boy had gone through each step of the true chakra walking training, he would start Naruto out on his first idea towards item 4, the kaiten. He would have to either find someone willing to teach it to him, or arrange for them to teach it to Naruto. It was even possible that he may be able to reverse engineer it to create a jutsu of the same effect. His work on item 10 was mostly complete. Naruto knew how to get and maintain shinobi tools. All that was left for that was teaching him about the processes of making the tags and the bingo book, and making good on his extra promise of explosive clone tools. Items 1 and 2, however, would not happen until after the exam. That was certain. From the progress Naruto had displayed already, Ebisu was sure that those 2 would be the only things he had left in the bet by the end of the next year. Reflecting over his past assumptions, he was astounded to find his opinion of the child so greatly changed. When this had began, he was certain it would take years to teach him everything. Now he was actually planning for most of them in a period of 6 months. The scrolls Sasuke had given him were obviously copied from the Uchiha library by different people, which meant Uchiha Haim had kept all the notes and such about jutsu from his clansmen. The 3 scrolls each held a jutsu, and the author's notes on learning them. All 3 were C-rank ninjutsu, one of each type of wind jutsu. The air bullet was an impact type. It compressed air into a ball and sent it to impact with whatever you aimed it at. It was also one of the frequently flying 5, alongside the dragon, water, and mud bullets and the lightning fang. The vacuum palm was a blast type, creating a current of air that would blow the target away. It was one of the advanced affinity few alongside the fireball, water flow spout, filling the glove jutsu, and the static palm, which was more commonly called the shocking grasp. Each of these were the jutsu used when teaching shinobi to fully convert their chakra into the element of their affinity. The final scroll held the cutting breeze. It was a more advanced cutting type than the cutting palm jutsu, which Ebisu had mentioned when covering the traveling 10. The cutting palm was used to cut minor things like rope or bark or grass. Next in the traveling 10 was the moisture spout, which basically created condensation in an area to gather water from the air itself. Then there was the air shift, using chakra to push air into motion, which blows away smoke and scents. After that was the friction thumb spark, which created a minor spark of flame used for lighting fires, and the static pinch, which gathered static buildup in the air and could produce light. The soil shift slightly shifted loose soil, softening the ground for sleep or for digging a fire pit. Increasing this skill allowed the user to perform the soil subshift that extends downwards to dispose of waste. The earth shift was larger still, and could move large amounts of earth for making fire pits, trenches, or shelters without actually digging. The final jutsu in the traveling 10 was the casting veil, an area-wide henge that disguises your camp as what it was before you began setting up. It could also be used for many other disguises, but that was the use that got it into the traveling 10. The 10th skill was not a jutsu, but instead it was the use of sealing scrolls to pack, carry, and unpack all your things. Naruto would have to learn the cutting palm by working downwards from the cutting breeze, it seemed. The 3 selected jutsu would more than get him started learning to use his element. Uchiha Haim had chosen well. Tucking the scrolls into his pocket, Naruto walked to the closest tree and snatched 2 leaves down from it. He knew that Sasuke could hold a leaf to his forehead. The genius had done it often enough in the academy, so Naruto passed over that one. They would begin with holding a leaf to the back of each of their hands. As he described the first step, he reminded Sasuke that he would have to teach each step to Sakura, so he needed to pay attention to how they were explained as well. Attaching the